Service to make his presentation in the opening of the budget debate on the Appropriations Act 2023.
Thank you, House Leader. And I think I saw the Honorable Mr. Frank Phipps join us in the Well of Parliament. Want to recognize you and let you know it's good to have you here with us, sir. For the adoption of the report of the Standing Finance Committee, that it be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Sir, I'm inviting you now to ask for the suspension for the appropriation bill.
Madam Speaker, as we well know, the subject of the budget is the appropriation bill, but before the debate commences, the report of the Standing Finance Committee must be adopted. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I now move that the motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Finance Committee, notice of which I jumped, yes, I've gone too far. Madam Speaker, I want to...
Just before you begin, I just want to make sure we could go a little slowly so that what we will do is we are going to backtrack for the budget debate is the appropriation bill. So we want to have, first of all, the adoption of the report of the standing, which is what you just asked for. So now we've completed that and we're now moving for the suspension of the standing orders to introduce the appropriation bill. That's where we are now, Minister, to introduce the appropriation bill.
So, Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Appropriation Act 2023.
Members, the question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister of Finance and the Public Service to introduce and have read a first time a bill entitled the Appropriation Act 2023 to give notice of the second reading of the bill and to commence the debate. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read a first time a bill entitled the Appropriation Act 2023.
A bill shortly entitled the Appropriation Act 2023 read a first time.
Minister, invited for the second reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give second reading of the bill. And I rise, Madam Speaker, to begin the opening of my budget presentation for 2023-2024. Madam Speaker, I begin by thanking God Almighty, from whom all blessings flow. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy mercy, and thy loving kindness. Madam Speaker, I could not possibly have made it through this year without the support of family, friends, and colleagues. 2 years ago, Madam Speaker, I delivered the budget presentation to an empty gallery due to the restrictions of COVID-19. Last year, the gallery, if you'll recall, was half full to meet the COVID-19 protocols in place at the time. Madam Speaker, you know say COVID now keep when you look up at the gallery this afternoon, Madam Speaker, full. Though we know we have to engage in healthy practices, thank God, Madam Speaker, we have overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. To those watching on social media, on cable, on television, and to the diaspora overseas, thank you for tuning in. Madam Speaker, for the last 2 years, I've not had the company of the executive of St. Andrew Northwestern constituency in the gallery. I am pleased, Madam Speaker, beyond words, that the executive of the St. Andrew Northwestern constituency are here this afternoon. I thank you all for your steadfast support and for your commitment to the citizens of Northwestern St. Andrew. Madam Speaker, I thank my parliamentary colleagues for the vim, the vigor, and the vitality of the government caucus. Thank you for your encouragement and support. It is a privilege, Madam Speaker, to work with a team of passionate advocates of Jamaica's development. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has been a leader for all seasons. Whether it is a parliamentary majority of one or a supermajority greater than 2/3, you lead with effortless, dramaless ease. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has been an exemplary leader during these times. He has been courageous, empathetic, and wise, and I thank him for his leadership, his counsel, his advice, and support, Madam Speaker. Thank God that we have Andrew Michael Holness as Prime Minister of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, I thank my cabinet colleagues for their support and for a working environment characterized by teamwork, cohesiveness, and shared vision. We have had to make some tough decisions this past year, and our deliberations have regularly gone into the night, Madam Speaker, with Jamaica's best interests as our North Star. Madam Speaker, I also want to thank my colleague minister in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Minister Marsha Smith, for her continued commitment and support. Jamaica benefits from a first-class team, Madam Speaker, at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, and I acknowledge them for their dedication and commitment. I thank the Financial Secretary, Darlene Morrison, and her team at the ministry, as well as my advisory staff. I also thank the administrative and ancillary staff in my office and the security staff assigned to me, who always go beyond the call of duty. Madam Speaker, I thank the board and management of the Bank of Jamaica and the Planning Institute, critical institutions that play a key role in Jamaica's economy. And Madam Speaker, most of all, I'd like to thank my family. Who now share me with the citizens of Northwest St. Andrew, and by extension, the people of Jamaica. To my brothers and sisters, thank you. To my wife and children, thank you. You helped me maintain balance and perspectives, and without you, I could not do what I do. I am indebted to my parents, the late Justice Nigel Clarke and Mrs. Mary Clarke, for imparting values I cherish. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to report to this honorable House and to the people of Jamaica that the Jamaican economy is projected to have expanded by 3.4% in the fourth quarter of 2022. Madam Speaker, the economy officially expanded by 5.8% in the third quarter, 4.8% in the second quarter, and 6.5% in the first quarter of 2022. This follows economic expansion of 6.7% in 2021, the fourth quarter, 5.9% in the third quarter, and a record 14.2% recovery in the second quarter of 2021. Madam Speaker, by virtue of this performance, I am pleased to update the House, and indeed all Jamaicans here and in the diaspora, that the Jamaican economy has recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, Madam Speaker, the PIOJ projects that by December of 2022, Jamaica not only achieved pre-COVID levels of economic output, but Jamaica surpassed pre-pandemic levels of economic output. This, Madam Speaker, is a national achievement of which all Jamaicans can be proud. This is a result of our collective efforts, and it comes one fiscal year ahead of prior projections. And Madam Speaker, for those who question whether this rapid growth in 2021 and in 2022 is simply a result of the steep decline in the economy in 2020, I simply ask, Madam Speaker, after a decline of 6.7% in 1976, why didn't we grow in 1977? If that logic is true. If after a decline of 4.5% in 1985, why didn't we grow in 1986? After a decline of 3.2% in 2009, why didn't we expand in 2010? In our history, Madam Speaker, economic decline has been often followed by further decline, sadly. Together, we, the Jamaican society, we together broke that cycle, Madam Speaker, and hopefully and prayerfully, a new template has been established, Madam Speaker, for the future. As I've said in this House before, and it begs repeating, Madam Speaker, is that the significance of this achievement is evident by reference to our own economic history, where it took 14 years from 1975 to 1989, from 1976 to 89, to recover to 1975 levels of economic output after declines of 6.5%, 2.4%, 1.8%, and 5.7%. In 76, 77, 79, and 1980. More recently, it took 11 years to recover from the economic shock delivered by the global financial crisis, when economic output registered negative growth of just 0.8% in 2008, 3.4% in 2009, 1.4% in 2010. Yet it took us 11 years to get back to pre-global financial crisis levels of economic output. Madam Speaker, we suffered a devastating economic shock of negative 10% in 2020. We lost $2.5 billion of foreign exchange earnings. Little Jamaica, Madam Speaker, survived a decimation of foreign exchange inflows. This is an amazing show of resilience of our country. And Madam Speaker, I think it's quite appropriate to pause in this moment of recovery, or in this time of recovery, to recognize the role of the diaspora, who rose to the occasion in that year of that 2020 year of COVID, sent $600 million more than the year before. That was a 23% increase. And on behalf of the Jamaican people here on the island, I say to members of the diaspora, thank you. Importantly, Madam Speaker, and unlike times past, Though our debt increased dramatically to 110% of GDP approximately, we were able to avoid a fiscal crisis through prudent policy choices and the tremendous support of the Jamaican people. And Madam Speaker, it is critically important to note that our financial services sector, the lifeblood of the economy, remains strong, robust, and resilient through the COVID-19 economic shock and the inflation crisis that followed shortly after. Any one of these crises, Madam Speaker, a balance of payments crisis, a fiscal crisis, a financial sector crisis triggered by the COVID-19 economic shock, could, as has happened in many countries around the world, would have seriously complicated and prolonged economic recovery. And it would have been easy to happen here in Jamaica. Just look around, Madam Speaker. Countries in Central America, in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, are battling serious fiscal crises, serious balance of payment crises, Madam Speaker, triggered by the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are countries that will not recover to pre-COVID levels for 5 years. Some of them 10 years, Madam Speaker. While Jamaica today stands as a shining example to the world. Jamaica, Madam Speaker, is recognized internationally for music and sport and the vibrancy of our culture. Though we have many challenges, Madam Speaker, Jamaica is also becoming known and recognized globally for our collective achievement of the success of our economic reforms and our economic recovery. Not only, Madam Speaker, has output now surpassed pre-COVID levels, but the levels of unemployment are also lower today than the historic lows achieved immediately prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since we have been measuring unemployment, Madam Speaker, it has never been lower than the 6% achieved in April of 2022. Madam Speaker, they say I like to say first time in history, and that's because I am fully cognizant that we are living in historical times. And if we are not conscious of the moment, Madam Speaker, we will lose the promise that's embedded in it. So we have to always be cognizant and remind ourselves we're doing things today, achieving things today in Jamaica that have never been done before, never been achieved before. Those are precious, hard-earned victories, Madam Speaker, won by blood, sweat, and tears of the Jamaican people. And we must recognize, preserve those gains, Madam Speaker, maintain those gains, Madam Speaker, increase those gains, Madam Speaker, and then share the gains with the Jamaican people. So, Madam Speaker, over 150, so you look at that's the employed labor force here. I want you to look at that graph very clearly. It took us 4 years, Madam Speaker, to lose nearly 100,000 jobs in the global financial crisis. 4 years. And then it took us another 8 years to get those jobs back. Sorry, it's 8 overall. Another 4 years or 5 years to get them back. So 4 years to lose 100,000, 4 years to get them back. Okay? So peak to peak is 8 years. Does that make sense? Peak to peak is 8 years. In 4 months, Madam Speaker, we lost 150,000 jobs. And since that time, more than 150,000 jobs have been created or restored, Madam Speaker. Again, Madam Speaker, I don't like when I talk history, but I'm pleased to report that the number of persons employed as at April 2022 of 1,269,300 is the highest number of persons ever recorded as being employed in Jamaica's history. Now, Madam Speaker, in my 2021 budget presentation, I shared the view that many countries in emerging markets and several developed nations around the world would be impacted by major debt crisis. You remember? Before it happened, I stood in this right here, Madam Speaker, and I told you it was going to happen. 2 years later, Madam Speaker, I don't want to name all the countries, but they're public information, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, Ghana, several countries in our region who shall remain nameless, and in our hemisphere, as I mentioned earlier, making headlines for fiscal distress. Madam Speaker, not only have we recovered lost economic output, not only have we recovered jobs lost, but also, Madam Speaker, despite the fact that our debt levels attained the worrying heights of 110% of GDP, which is where they were in the global financial crisis. In the aftermath of the pandemic, I'm pleased to report to this honorable House that our debt level in Jamaica today is also lower than it was prior to the pandemic. Madam Speaker, data from the IMF confirms that with the exception of oil-rich Guyana, there is no other country in the Western Hemisphere, no other independent state in the Western Hemisphere that can claim all three of these things at the same time in 2022. Higher economic output in real terms than prior to COVID, lower unemployment than prior to COVID, and lower debt than prior to COVID, Madam Speaker. Quite a few countries have two of those, Madam Speaker, but Jamaica is the only one in this hemisphere, with the exception of Guyana, that can report those three things as at 2022. Madam Speaker, this is our collective achievement, and I salute and thank the Jamaican people, even as I want to say thanks to God Almighty, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are many lessons from the COVID economic recovery, and a budget speech is not the place for all of them. Madam Speaker, the availability of resource buffers, hard, cold resource buffers that we could draw on, made a huge difference. We had a big debt maturity in September 2020, and we were strategically stockpiling so that we could pay down on that maturity rather than refinance it, and therefore create fiscal space. So the privatization of Trans Jamaica, the privatization of Wigton, the reintegration of PCJ, right? All of those delivered significant resources to the government of Jamaica, inclusive of the debt refinancing we're talking about, nearly $20 billion from Trans Jamaica, including their dividend, nearly $15 billion from Wigton, $6 billion from PCJ, and other things as well. In addition, we had fiscal overperformance. So we went into the COVID-19 pandemic, Madam Speaker, with over $80 billion of resources destined for debt repayment. But at least we had it on hand. Or else, Madam Speaker, it would have been an even steeper climb. Madam Speaker, buffers like the capitalization of the central bank in 2018 and 2019 is important to connect policy decisions with success and outcomes. We took a decision in this House to capitalize the central bank by $20 billion in 2018 and 2019. A strong capitalized central bank was able to intervene and do things during COVID-19 in supporting the financial sector that they would have been unable to do otherwise, and that they were unable to do in previous times as well. Madam Speaker, we had a buffer that we put away in the natural contingencies fund. When we increased the reserves, the contingencies fund limit to $10 billion, we tucked away $4.5 billion. Madam Speaker, in those first months of COVID, before we could come back with a supplementary budget, we had that $4.5 billion to draw on. And the first care payment came out of that, Madam Speaker. Quite significantly, something that has not been reported often or reported in the press that I've seen, is the fact that we increased the non-borrowed reserves in the central bank by $1 billion between 2016 and 2019. So we would report reserves before that, before 2016, but a lot of the reserves, public information, what we call borrowed reserves, where there were long-term CDs that had to be paid back. Madam Speaker, between 2016 and 2019, we got rid of many of those, and the reserves increased, the non-borrowed reserves increased by over $1 billion US, which provided resilience, Madam Speaker, during the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the lessons of this experience, Madam Speaker, is the critical importance of ensuring that we have adequate resource buffers to protect against unexpected shocks. Madam Speaker, our economy is very open. Cross-border trade in goods and services is 80% of GDP. In the United States, it's less than 30, which means that we import crises from around the world. And we know that is our experience. Our economic openness is also related to our dependence on foreign imported food and energy. And adverse movements in those commodities have contributed to economic shock in Jamaica time and again. And we live in a climatic zone that's susceptible to natural disaster. Madam Speaker, these are our simple realities. And after a careful review of our economic history, it reveals that these have long been our economic realities, or our realities. Members of this honorable House, Madam Speaker, my fellow Jamaicans, just reflect on the serious economic impact on Jamaica of various adverse episodes, such as the oil price shock of 1974, the oil price shock of 1976, the crash in world alumina prices of the mid-1980s, Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, the September 11 terrorist attack of 2011, Hurricane Ivan in 2004, Hurricane Dee in 2007, the global financial crisis, the oil price shock of 2008, Hurricane Gustav, Hurricane Sandy, another oil price shock in 2010 to 2014, Hurricane Matthew in 2016, the COVID pandemic in 2020, the Ukraine war of 2022, the oil price shock of 2022, the global inflation crisis of 2022. And this list is by no means complete. Madam Speaker, the bad news is that Jamaica will continue to suffer from adverse external events and economic shocks in the future. We cannot control them. We cannot stop them. But the good news, Madam Speaker, is that we cannot and must not leave our social and economic development hostage to these outside forces.
It's not just consumers who are, getting tighter with their wallets and stuff, but sellers have to do that as well. Business owners, it's getting more competitive, because of the economy, but also because costs are rising. We got to see where costs can be cut, without cutting the important things, which is you should never cut quality. So it's like finding out how to save money, and is like utilizing ChatGPT and different things to automate different processes. And of course, using tools like Helium-10 to take over a lot of the manual
for our own vulnerability and prepare for them. That is how we ensure quick recoveries, Madam Speaker, from economic shock. And that is why we are able to respond, Madam Speaker, and recover as we have. Madam Speaker, sadly, we have been, as I mentioned, hit by all of these shocks over the last several decades. But we must all in this House be committed to breaking that cycle and changing the historical narrative. To avoid this fate in the future, we must maintain above adequate reserves in our central bank. We must reduce our dependence on imported food and energy. We must put in place fiscal buffers to counter the economic effect of natural disasters, and we must keep our debt levels low. These, Madam Speaker, will provide Jamaica with the flexibility needed to respond to economic shocks, to protect the vulnerable in our society, and to ensure a strong and speedy recovery. Madam Speaker, we must put in place economic and social policies that are appropriate for our size and position in the world economy, and which prioritize building up resource buffers. We must preserve and increase the gains from economic reform and economic recovery. Madam Speaker, earlier I spoke about Jamaica's debt being lower today than prior to the pandemic. We are on track, Madam Speaker, to achieving the lowest level of debt in over 20 years. And just today, Madam Speaker, at 2:02 p.m., the international rating agency Fitch put out their press release revising Jamaica's outlook to positive, Madam Speaker. Hot off the press, Madam Speaker, live and direct, Madam Speaker. You can see on the top, 2:02, you can't read, 2:02 p.m. Madam Speaker, our goal is that by next time this year, and there's a goal, there's always a risk in talking about goals, but it is our goal that by next time this year, Jamaica's debt level will be lower than it was prior to the domestic economic shock known as FinSAC. For the younger generation, Madam Speaker, FinSAC stands for the Financial Sector Adjustment Company, a massive entity established by the government of the day to address the financial sector crisis in the 1990s. FinSAC resulted in a massive increase in debt from the mid-70s to approximately 110% in a few short years. And then it came down a little bit and went back up again. Madam Speaker, this stock of debt has dogged Jamaica ever since. And it has no doubt been compounded by other crises. It will have taken us, Madam Speaker, I just want you to reflect on it. Today is 2023. I am saying that by March 2024, we should get into the domain of pre-FinSAC debt. Madam Speaker, we're talking about 30 years, Madam Speaker. It has taken us it will have taken us almost 30 years, Madam Speaker, to take that debt off our backs, Madam Speaker. "30 years, I want you to reflect on that. 30 years, and that's a central lesson of debt. It is easy to put it on, but very hard to take it off. A single policy, Madam Speaker, can add mountains of debt that strangle the chances of an entire generation. Another problem with debt is that it increases the rigidity of the budget because you end up with high fixed expenses to service and repay, which cannot be altered even in times of crisis. High debt makes economic crises worse, and it makes economic shocks worse. And, Madam Speaker, initial economic shocks can lead to other crises, which complicate and lengthen recovery. Lengthy, decade-long periods of economic recovery stifle and impede social, economic, and national development. High debt, though, Madam Speaker, is not the metric in itself. Debt is just a proxy for the more relevant metric, which is the cost of servicing that debt as a percentage of GDP. You follow me? So we live in a world, Madam Speaker, for better or for worse, which prices money based on the perceived ability to repay. Those who are viewed as having the least ability to repay, unfortunately, gets charged the most. The same it is for countries. The more you're unable to repay, is the higher the price you're going to pay for the debt. So look, we can't follow the United States of America, whose debt today is over 100% of GDP. Because you know what? Even that relatively high debt, you know what the average cost for their debt is? Today, even today, it's 2%. So 2% times 100, Madam Speaker, they're spending 2% of GDP on interest. And even us here in Jamaica, with debt much lower, we're tracking for under 80% as of March 31st. We are still spending 6% of GDP to service our debt. So, although, Madam Speaker, Jamaica has less debt, The cost of our debt takes up 300% more fiscal space than theirs. So we can't watch them. We can't watch them country America and Europe, what them do. We have to do what is right for us, Mr. Speaker. Shakespeare, Madam Speaker, if I may quote him, wrote in Hamlet, "This above all, to thine own self be true." We must know ourselves and be true to ourselves by internalizing our own realities and maintaining a policy posture that is relevant and optimal for our own circumstances, Madam Speaker. Given our level of openness and our level of vulnerability, our debt has to be maintained at levels that are substantially lower than even now, if we are to have a meaningful chance of sustainable development. Madam Speaker, Jamaica is a part of CARICOM, which is an extremely high debt zone, unfortunately. And we have been in this paradigm for so long that high debt has been normalized. And we think that 80% is low. The reality, Madam Speaker, is that there are many successful small countries with open economies. And when you look at the levels of debt that they have, Dominican Republic is 44% of GDP. Ireland is 42% of GDP. Latvia, Lithuania are both 36% of GDP. New Zealand is 23% of GDP. Estonia is 9%. Madam Speaker, we can and must continue reducing our debt as a percentage of GDP to ensure that we have fiscal space and flexibility to respond and to recover quickly and effectively from the economic shocks that frequent us based on our circumstances. We must preserve, Madam Speaker, we must maintain the gains of economic reform and economic recovery. So, Madam Speaker, we have achieved economic recovery from COVID-19, and we need to build on this. To do that, we must protect the gains of the economic recovery. As our debt lowers to levels not seen in a generation, and with the prospect of realizing even lower levels of debt not seen in 50 years, Madam Speaker, this will provide fiscal space that we have not had in generations. Madam Speaker, as a result of these reforms and development and the prospects that Jamaica has the capacity to become the breakout country of the third decade of the 21st century. For this reason, Madam Speaker, about preserving and maintaining the gains of economic recovery, I am pleased to update the House that His Excellency the Governor General, on the advice of the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, last Friday, swore in Jamaica's first Fiscal Commissioner who will head Jamaica's Independent Fiscal Commission. A search committee chaired by Jamaica's own Calvin MacDonald, who retired as a secretary to the IMF, and consisting of the head of EPOC and the president of the Confederation of Trade Unions and other specialists, conducted an open and competitive search. The new fiscal commissioner is a veteran of the Ministry of Finance who previously spent 3 years at the IMF. He returned and was appointed Deputy Financial Secretary, and then he was recruited by the Ministry of National Security, where he has served as permanent secretary since 2020. The Fiscal Commission will be the guardian and interpreter of Jamaica's fiscal rules, and will be required to monitor adherence to these rules and provide independent assessments of budgetary outcomes in addition to independent analysis. Madam Speaker, we must protect the gains of an economic recovery and indeed the path of fiscal responsibility that Jamaica has pursued for a decade and which has delivered results for us as a country. Madam Speaker, the benefits of pursuing sound public financial management are so significant that it cannot be left to the Minister of Finance alone. It cannot even be left to the Ministry of Finance alone. It cannot be left to the Cabinet alone, or even Parliament alone. Sound public financial management, appropriate for our circumstances, has to be an instinct that permeates our society. Madam Speaker, noble economic and social policy goals cannot be sustainably achieved without sound public financial management that takes into account all of our circumstances. And there is an appalling lack of opportunity for public financial management research and training in the Caribbean. If we are to command our own ship, Madam Speaker, and to command it sustainably and independently, then a large increase in the supply of graduates specializing in public finance is a national imperative. In addition, generations of public sector leaders will need better exposure to and training in financial management. For these reasons, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that the government of Jamaica will supplement the budgetary grant extended to the University of the West Indies in the amount of $200 million as a down payment to endow a fiscal research institute within the Department of Economics. This will be followed by further endowments to establish the Fiscal Research Institute, which we expect to be financed from the returns on its endowment. I intend to secure the support of the private sector in endowing the chair of this institute as part of the government's initiative in collaboration with UAE. The Fiscal Research Institute will be a non-partisan think tank engaged in conducting rigorous, high-level research, teaching, and training in public finance and public policy. The institute will offer courses in public finance and public financial management at the undergraduate and graduate levels. It will analyze and inform economic and social policy choices involving public expenditure, taxation, fiscal sustainability to help the Jamaican public understand policy choices, Madam Speaker, of individuals, households, and firms, and the government's financial position. Madam Speaker, while we'll always be able to benefit from the advice of multilateral partners, the Jamaica project becomes unsustainable without increased domestic capacity for public finance management, training, analysis, and research. We must preserve and maintain the gains. Madam Speaker, we will be bringing to this House, Madam Speaker, legislation to establish a natural disaster fund along with laws that govern how and under what circumstances these amounts can be accessed. This will not be a new public body, Madam Speaker, with all attendant costs. You remember we tucked away $4.5 billion in the contingencies fund at the BOJ. That would be the first capitalization of the National Disaster Fund. But this will just an account at the BOJ under where the administration of that account is outsourced to them. The National Disaster Fund will complement the suite of fiscal instruments that we have that I've outlined previously: the contingent credit facility, the from the IDB, the Caribbean Catastrophe Reinsurance Facility, and the catastrophe bond. And the legislation will set out the laws that govern when and how and under what circumstances these amounts can be accessed. And I acknowledge, Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition, who was the opposition spokesperson at the time, for the level of work, the collaboration in putting these funds away, even without any legislation in place, with a common understanding on how it would be used. Following through, and we're going to bring the legislation here that governs how those funds can be used. Madam Speaker, despite this encouraging recovery, global uncertainties loom on various fronts. Madam Speaker, Europe is forecasted to be in economic recession, and the global inflation crisis has not totally subsided. Over the next 2 years, while interest rates are rising globally, we have $1 billion of debt that matures. For this reason, Madam Speaker, we have taken advantage of a new product that did not exist before from the fund, a $750 million resilience and sustainability facility at an interest rate of slightly above 3%, but less than 4%, and a repayment period of 20 years with a moratorium for 10 years. Madam Speaker, these are very attractive terms, and the facility is a compelling instrument that lowers our interest costs by nearly $50 million a year over 20 years, based on the average blended borrowing cost that Jamaica has to pay. And Madam Speaker, we also will be accessing have accessed a $963 million precautionary liquidity line that, although we have $4 billion of gross reserves, this line in the context of global uncertainties provides us with extra resources should Jamaica need it. These arrangements, Madam Speaker, will not interfere with our already planned financial programs and activities. The board of the fund approved these a few days ago, and there wasn't even a headline in a newspaper, Madam Speaker, indicating the level of maturity that we have about these kinds of arrangements that ultimately are in Jamaica's best interest. Madam Speaker, we're now in a very different era of our economic development, with a very different policy framework than used in the past. One where we try to anticipate events in advance, economic events, and take steps necessary to provide for them. Now, Madam Speaker, the preservation of the gains of economic reform and recovery requires the continued entrenchment of a stable macroeconomic framework. And macroeconomic stability requires the prerequisite of financial sector stability. And Jamaica has worked hard at financial sector stability since the dark days of FinSap. And I'd like to remind this House and the Jamaican people that since 2008, Jamaica has suffered from a variety of economic and financial shocks, some of which I mentioned earlier, some that I didn't. The global financial crisis that caused banking failures around the world and disrupted credit lines to Jamaica, the economic declines brought by the global financial crisis that weakened the economy and led to credit defaults, the oil price shocks of 2010 to 2014 and the resulting exchange rate pressures, the Jamaica debt exchange, which stressed the balance sheets of the financial sector firms, the national debt exchange, which also did the same, the COVID economic pandemic and inflation shocks. Despite all of these massive shocks, Madam Speaker, Jamaica has not had a single financial sector failure, touch wood, Madam Speaker, and thank God. This speaks volumes in objective and provable terms about the durability and strength of Jamaica's financial sector regulatory environment, and is in fact one of the unheralded achievements of successive administrations since 2008, and of the financial sector regulators at the BOJ and FSC in particular. I'd like to take this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to thank capable and talented professionals at the BOJ and FSC and other agencies and regulators who have contributed to this significant achievement. And it is in this context that the fraud, the 13-year fraud at stocks and securities is so unfortunate. It is as if Jamaica, Madam Speaker, driving up Spur Tree, was able to avoid colliding with 7 consecutive 18-wheeler trailers coming hurriedly down Spur Tree, head on in the opposite direction, only to experience a slow leak in one tire over the same period, leading, Madam Speaker, to a blip, a crash on the wall. Jamaica's financial sector regulators, Madam Speaker, have been successfully focused on safety and soundness, on capital adequacy, on prudential regulations, among other matters, focused on addressing key critical questions. Is the entity properly capitalized? Does the entity have a balance sheet risk if stressed can lead to failure? Does the entity pose a systemic risk to the rest of the financial system? And yet, Madam Speaker, a matter involving fraudulent market conduct related to off-balance sheet activities, which have no systemic risk at all, goes undetected for at least 13 years, which coincides with the period above. Madam Speaker, for Jamaica, the experience is vividly Shakespearean in character.
Minister's time has come to an end. And House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to continue his speech to its conclusion, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches.
Members, the question before the House is that there is a suspension of the standing orders to allow the Minister of Public Service and Finance to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, if any one of the following things happen, each in and of itself would have been a disaster. The largest security theft in Jamaica, the longest running securities theft in Jamaica, covering 13 years, and the theft of assets belonging to Jamaica's most successful athlete and Olympian, Ambassador Usain Bolt. To have all three of those happen in the same incident at the same time, Madam Speaker, is a wrenching punch to the gut. And I remain personally shocked and angered by these events. And to have this fraud occur in the context of and over exactly the same period as the otherwise extremely successful tenure of our regulators in preventing Jamaica from failing in the financial sector is a bitter irony for both our financial sector regulators and for Jamaica. The only good news relatively, Madam Speaker, is that SSL was a relatively small securities dealer with less than 2% of the entire securities dealers' industry funds and less than 0.6% of the assets of the total financial system. Madam Speaker, with respect to the investigation in this matter, the policy position of the government is clear. We will make whatever resources are necessary available to ensure a thorough, fair, complete, and independent investigation. Madam Speaker, we will also leave no stone unturned. We will follow the evidence, or the investigators, Madam Speaker, the policy of the government is that they follow the evidence wherever it may lead, and that we seek international assistance. On the latter point, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to provide the following update. Arising from, writing to, and collaborating with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom, this morning, Madam Speaker, I signed a statement of work with Kroll Associates UK, the British subsidiary of the multinational risk and financial advisory firm, to provide forensic audit investigative services to the Financial Investigations Division in its probe of the SSL matter. Kroll will bring leading-edge technology that will support the FID in unraveling all aspects of this 13-year fraud and bringing co-conspirators and accomplices to justice. I'm also happy to share, Madam Speaker, that the British government, which has long supported the FID, has offered to cover some of the initial costs of this engagement, with the government of Jamaica covering the balance. Madam Speaker, I asked Jamaicans not, this occurred this morning, Madam Speaker. You can see the same tie, same jacket. Madam Speaker, I asked Jamaicans not to jump to conclusions, but to await the outcome of the investigations. A formidable team of highly capable local law enforcement professionals from multiple agencies, supported by foreign investigative capacity, is on the case. The government will not carry out the investigation. That is the work of the investigative authorities. But our policy directions are clear, Madam Speaker. We'll get to the bottom of this matter, and we'll continue to keep the Jamaican people informed, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, ministers of government, it may surprise some, are not all powerful. Maybe as politicians over time, we are incentivized to appear that way. Maybe it is that we have actually over time as a group marketed ourselves in that way. And maybe the nature of opposition politics across time is to paint the narrative as if we were all powerful, so perceived failures can then be blamed at the feet of government politicians. However, Madam Speaker, I've always been clear, and my policy choices support the fact that I believe in limited authority of the minister. And on this point, the Constitution provides me refuge. The Minister of Finance's primary responsibility, Madam Speaker, is policy making, resolving issues brought for action by those implementing policy, and coordinating solutions across departments and agencies with ministries and colleagues and across ministries as required, in addition, of course, to budgetary responsibilities and economic responsibilities. The minister can also receive complaints and make inquiries, and operational independence does not mean operational isolation. Madam Speaker, the Financial Services Commission Act of 2001 does not contemplate the minister's direct involvement in supervisory directions and activities. Rather, the act explicitly states that the minister may, after consultation with the chairman of the commission, give to the commission directions of a general character as to the policy to be followed by the commission. As such, the minister's responsibility is not to make operational decisions, or in this case, regulatory decisions, or to second-guess prudential decisions or directions. The minister does not necessarily possess the expertise, experience, or frankly, the knowledge to be vested with that responsibility. Furthermore, the sanctity of the regulatory space would be compromised by the reality or the perception of ministerial interference. Prudential decision must always be seen as being based on purely technical grounds. The possibility of political motive must be reduced to zero. Madam Speaker, we achieve this by ensuring operational independence and ministerial non-interference in the prudential and operational decisions of regulatory bodies. And Jamaica is a signatory to a G20 authorized document where we commit to the operational independence of the FSC. Madam Speaker, in our regulatory reform, we'll go further to remove any ambiguity whatsoever about the operational independence of the successor institution to the FSC. Madam Speaker, it's an inconvenient fact that wherever there's economic freedom, unfortunately, bad actors will sometimes abuse that freedom in doing harm to others. And government and regulatory agencies, Madam Speaker, will not be able to totally eliminate fraud. Although the United States has one of the most well-funded and robust regulatory regimes across many departments and agencies of government, there have been several well-known examples of multi-billion-dollar frauds which escape regulatory oversight. Enron in 2001, WorldCom in 2002, Tyco in 2002, AIG 2005, Lehman Brothers in 2008, Bernie Madoff, Purdue, Theranos, FTX, etc. What we must do is to act swiftly after the detection to fix any institutional weaknesses that allow fraud to occur and to go undetected, and to institute necessary reforms to policies and regulations to strengthen the regime. Madam Speaker, we have acted swiftly by all historical standards, Madam Speaker, and even by absolute standards. We have announced an upgraded and regulatory model. We have strengthened the board of the FSC. We have sought the support of international forensic auditors. We have brought in the BOJ to provide regulatory oversight. We've appointed a new executive director. We've appointed a temporary manager of SSL. We have filed an injunction preventing the winding up of SSL, and the FID has requested the assistance of the FBI and started working with them several weeks ago on this case. And as I just confirmed and announced, we sought the support of the British government, and that overture led to Kroll working with the FID on the forensic audit part of the investigation. Madam Speaker, the IMF in their Article 4 report described the government's efforts to address SSL as, quote, moving swiftly on the matter. And what we must do as a society is to learn from this episode and to do everything in our power to ensure that something like this does not happen again. While it is not FSC's role to detect fraud, with the benefit of hindsight, it seems clear that FSC did not exercise sufficient rigor over and tolerated significant breaches for far too long. Over 13 years, the staff dutifully identified breaches, recommended that SSL be placed under what are known as directions as a result of those breaches, and the board implemented those directions on each occasion, which were designed to cauterize the identified breaches. SSL was under directions from 2010 to 2013, and amended directions from 2013 to 2017. And they were placed under directions again from 2019 to 2022, and directions again in 2023. Madam Speaker, this cycle of breaches followed by the issuance of directions spanned 3 political administrations, 4 executive directors, and at least 5 chairpersons. The FSC obviously had an institutional approach where they opted to work with a licensee towards rehabilitation rather than putting it out of business. Well, Madam Speaker, Jamaica has learned a lesson that this approach may not be the most effective. our regulators need to ensure that repeated, prolonged breaches of financial sector regulations are followed by license suspension or cancellation, no matter who you are. That needs to be endorsed. No matter who you are. So, Madam Speaker, I've already announced the reform agenda that we will pursue, and I won't repeat it here in the interest of time. But suffice to say that in a country where 90% of financial sector assets are in the hands of financial sector conglomerates, our regulatory environment has to reflect that structure. And what we'll be doing is having a bifurcation of regulation where prudential safety and soundness regulation for the entire financial sector will be the BOJ, and market conduct and consumer protection regulation for the entire financial sector will be with the reformatted FSC. This House, Madam Speaker, members on both sides have often called for greater market conduct and consumer protection regulation, Madam Speaker, and by having an institution that is wholly and solely dedicated to this task, that institution will be the defender of the Jamaican people, making sure that business conduct in financial sector firms is ethical and above board. Now, Madam Speaker, there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Madam Speaker, we, the Jamaican people, want to go far. We have a vision of ourselves as a people of destiny in this world. We're a land with a message for the world, a city on the hill. Madam Speaker, no single group can get there alone. We have to go together. During times of setback, we share the pain and we prioritize the protection of the vulnerable with targeted policies. Madam Speaker, as we recover, we share the gains. Quality of life is only partially determined by one's level of income. Much of one's quality of life is determined by the state of the physical, social, and community infrastructure in a country. It is the quality of public transportation, of public hospitals, of schools, roads, water, sewage, security, and related infrastructure that heavily influences quality of life. Madam Speaker, our aim is to share the benefits of economic recovery and economic reform by improving quality of life, Madam Speaker, and we improve that by improving the physical and social infrastructure. And as we share the gains, Madam Speaker, we hope that the people of Jamaica will see their own stake and role in Jamaica's economic development, progress, and prosperity, and therefore support what is required to deliver on those objectives. In sharing the benefits, we unite around the common cause of economic development. In sharing the benefits, Madam Speaker, we go together. When we go together, we go further, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, not only is this government dedicated to preserving and maintaining the gains of economic recovery, we're also committed to sharing the gains of that recovery. Madam Speaker, we committed as part of public sector pension reform to provide an improved mechanism for providing pensions to former public sector workers. I'm pleased to announce that the Accountants General Department will be assuming responsibility for the disbursement of pensions to retirees, Minister McKenzie, of municipal corporations within the next fiscal year. This will complete the process of centralization, and it's expected that former municipal corporation workers will receive retirement benefits on a timely basis. We're also completing a review of the Pensions Public Service Act of 2017 for the administration of pension, and the Ministry of Finance and Public Service has been receiving submissions from our trade union and staff association partners. Madam Speaker, as we continue to transform the public sector to a place where the brightest and the best find attractive employment, it is important for us as a country to place focus on the totality of the family structure that is necessary to support the public employee. To this end, the government, working with our trade union partners, has introduced new leave types and has improved existing leave benefits. As at the 1st of January 2023, Madam Speaker, male public sector employees meeting the agreed eligibility criteria can access up to 20 working days of paternity leave, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have also increased maternity leave in the public sector from 40 days with pay to 60 working days with pay, Madam Speaker. In addition, we have introduced adoption leave at the rate of 20 working days for the first time to complement the revised leave system, and also because we believe and recognize that adoption is an important element of the Jamaican family structure. Madam Speaker, change is not always that easy. The public sector compensation, Madam Speaker, the public sector compensation system we are moving away from cannot take Jamaica forward. We need a compensation system that is simple and easy to understand. And the old compensation system is not. Madam Speaker, I want you to understand that there's a salary scale, Madam Speaker, for virtually every group. For health record officers, it's HPC HR1, 1 to 3. For meteorologists, it's SOGST. For secretaries, OPS SS1 to 5. For drivers, LMO DR1 to 2. For legal officers, LO1 to LO6. A completely separate scale for office attendants, LMO/TS1. For public health inspectors, HPC EH4. For social workers, SWG PS2. For pharmacists, HPC PHS2. Clerical officers, PIDG RIM 1 to 5. Accountants, FMG PA 1 to 5. Librarians 1 to 5. And the list goes on. There are over 325 of these scales in the old compensation system, Madam Speaker. It is overly complex and utterly unmanageable. The new compensation system, Madam Speaker, replaces that with a core salary scale of 16 bands, which introduces simplicity and efficiency. There are 3 additional salary scales for teachers, the security services, and health practitioners that are aligned to the core scale. Madam Speaker, we also need a compensation system that's fair and equitable, and the old system is not. The old system was characterized by 185 allowances, which made compensation difficult to understand. With a plethora of tax-free and taxable allowances, public officers sometimes are not able to make like-for-like comparisons. And pensionable public officers suffer in retirement with pensions that have little similarity to pre-retirement income, even after 33 years of service. Because if non-pensionable allowances make up between 40 to 60% of income, then your maximum pension is going to be in the region of 25 to 33% or thereabouts of your pre-retirement income. Madam Speaker, the structure of allowances made compensation non-transparent in that allowances totaling 1% of GDP were included under programs, and those were tax-free allowances, but not salaries and wages. The structure introduced inequities, and one of the largest allowances, Madam Speaker, in aggregate was a traveling allowance. Introduced decades ago, it was designed to reimburse public officers who travel for their job. Not traveling to and from work, but traveling done in the performance of one's duties. Over decades, however, Madam Speaker, the rules around who could be designated a traveling officer and therefore be in receipt of the traveling allowance became lax. And this traveling allowance morphed into a kind of allowance that symbolized the status of the job, or in some public bodies, where it was used as a supplement to pay. And so it should be no surprise that it became the single largest allowance in the public sector. But along the way, had lost its purpose. Thousands of public sector employees received traveling allowance who sat behind their desk 40 hours a week, every working week of the year, and who stayed at a single address for every working hour of their lives. Now, traveling was adjusted by rates that were sometimes higher than the increase in basic pay, which meant that those in receipt of the traveling allowance generally fared better than others who were coming out of wage negotiations. Madam Speaker, this wasn't fair or equitable nor reasonable, especially when the traveling allowance became indiscriminately applied to include thousands who did not travel for their jobs. So, Madam Speaker, we have reformed the traveling allowance from being a fixed job-based allowance to being an activity-based reimbursement through a reformed reimbursable mileage. The traveling allowance, Madam Speaker, that came with a job, whether you actually traveled or not. We have absorbed that into salaries, so no one is worse off, and we've increased compensation net of taxes by a minimum of 20% over 3 years, which means the gross is much higher. Madam Speaker, the new traveling arrangement provides a mileage rate that is paid per mile for miles traveled. That way, the manager behind his or her desk 40 hours a week, or the person who works from a single address, cannot qualify for this reimbursement, but they're not disadvantaged in the transition because what they were receiving has been incorporated into their salary. Madam Speaker, this is fairer and more equitable for the public officer and more sustainable for the taxpayer who's paying the bill. Now, changing from one compensation system to another for the entire civil service is quite an undertaking. Madam Speaker, given that implementation of the new compensation system commenced several months after the effective date of April 1st, 2023, the first month's payslip that marks the transition from the old to the new would be the most complicated payslip that a public officer will ever receive in their lives. And this is the case, Madam Speaker, because the payslip is effectively a mini accounting statement. And it has, on a strip of paper, it has to account for what you're entitled to receive, what you have already received, and the difference between the two. The good news is that after this transition, it gets much simpler than what occurred in the transition. Now, Madam Speaker, I've reached out and had conversations with multiple public officers in various ministries. When I asked the question, Madam Speaker, if your salary is $100 and you've already received that $100, and we want your new salary to be $120 for that year, how much more should you receive? Everybody answers me, $20. I know you're maybe slower than the public officers. But, Madam Speaker, when I asked then, how you get the $20? Well, they say to me, well, I take the 120 and I subtract the 100 and it gives me 20. Then I say, does that mean that we have taken the $100 away? And everybody says, no. Well, Madam Speaker, this is a simple example, but essentially it is this kind of calculation that was expressed on payslips. But the presence of negative numbers on the payslip initially caused misinterpretation that something was being taken away. Because negative numbers on a payslip are usually associated with deductions like NIS and NHT, and deduction for credit union, right? And for your partner draw, suffice to say, etc. In this case, Madam Speaker, negative numbers on the payslip were simply a part of a reconciliation of what is owed, to calculate what is owed if your net income for the full year is to achieve the targeted restructured level, given what you've already received. Now, Madam Speaker, in Parliament, leading up to this transition, the opposition member asked whether or not travel would be recovered, and the response is a clear no. And implementation of the system, no. The implementation of the system demonstrates that there's no recovery. The guaranteed pay increase of 20% also reinforces that position. But, Madam Speaker, at best, there's a semantic difference as to what the term, what he might have meant, Madam Speaker. But clearly, it would not be a case that in arriving at new pay, Madam Speaker, one would have to not account for what was already received. Madam Speaker, the transition to the new compensation system and higher levels of pay and the absorption of non-taxable allowances into basic salary have pushed some public officers into higher tax brackets. And though net income is higher by a minimum of 20% over the 3 years. I know that for certain public officers, the higher tax bracket is an issue. The question of the income tax threshold has arisen, and I understand that. But, Madam Speaker, having added $120 billion of compensation on a net basis, 2023-24 over 21-22, and $100 billion 23-24 over 22-23, now is not the time for an adjustment to the income tax threshold. It just can't be afforded at this time in this context. However, Madam Speaker, whenever that changes, from the track record of this government, you can be assured that we will be the first to do it. Not to talk about it, Madam Speaker.
Yes, it will be done.
But to do it. Now, Madam Speaker, you know I have completed 2 rounds of negotiations, Madam Speaker. The ones that covered the period 27 to 2021 and the one that covered the period of the 21-22 fiscal year. And across this 5-year period, we agreed to the same fixed percentage increases, which means all 110,000 employees receive the same percentage increase on basic salary. So the question is, why didn't we just leave the system as it is and simply this time agree on another percentage increase that everyone would get? Surely it would have been much easier. And, Madam Speaker, it would have been a lot cheaper too. It would have been quicker, and it would have been less noisy and uncomfortable. But, Madam Speaker, we did not choose that easier course as it would not improve our circumstances. The government exists to take on the tough challenges that can improve outcomes and quality of life for all. Madam Speaker, moving everyone in lockstep, as we have done in every other round before this, would not have solved the myriad challenges in our compensation system and the challenges that we have attracting and retaining the talent that we need. I want to share a simple, small example. In a country, Madam Speaker, where over 30,000 persons have been murdered or killed over the last 25 years, our country is drenched in grief and drowning in psychological trauma. Hearts are bleeding, Madam Speaker. Souls are dying. Suppressed anguish, raw pain, and unresolved heartache are at the root of antisocial behavior and suboptimal levels of conduct and achievement. Our country, with our history, needs trained counselors and social workers who can help heal the nation's wounds. However, Madam Speaker, the remuneration for social workers in the public sector was artificially depressed as compensation for groups that were generally in the same pay packet received adjustments which moved away from social workers as a group. And this is repeated throughout the public sector. This resulted in compensation for that group that is inconsistent with our state of affairs and not reflective of the work done by social workers. So, Madam Speaker, the compensation review and restructuring allowed us to make adjustments to the pay structure for social workers that could not be achieved in the usual one-size-fits-all lockstep approach. Madam Speaker, the Jamaican bureaucracy needs to be able to attract and retain managerial and technical talent. We need the best IT technicians and computer scientists and communication specialists, network engineers, legal draftspersons, civil engineers, data scientists, lawyers, accountants, prosecutors, economists, managers, HR officers to deliver premium public service. Madam Speaker, we have vacancies in the economics unit of the Ministry of Finance, which we have not been able to fill for years. The same is true of the Attorney General's chambers and in technical areas where turnover on account of salary has been at epidemic proportions, Madam Speaker. This has been a crisis, and the system is breaking because we don't have sufficient talent for long enough periods in all the areas that we need. And we're unable to attract the talent because of the low compensation levels. So we needed to make adjustments to compensation in many of these technical and managerial levels to be in a position to attract and retain talent. And Madam Speaker, we could not do that without moving in a lockstep approach. On the top of it, the government was one of the biggest employers of minimum wage earners. Madam Speaker, under this government, we've made significant strides to change that. Achieving this, Madam Speaker, required significant adjustments to the salaries of drivers and office attendants, Madam Speaker, and others at the bottom of the scale. Madam Speaker, that is implemented, and it is an achievement of which we are extremely proud. So, Madam Speaker, as we map from 325 separate salary scales to 16, the compensation restructuring by design resulted in differential upward adjustments across the public sector. And this was and is at the root of much of the unease and tension that's been observed. When everyone received an increase of 5%, there are no comparisons across groups and individuals to be made. However, in a compensation restructuring with differentiated outcomes, comparisons are inevitable. And let me just point out what's the obvious, Madam Speaker, is that a compensation restructuring of this kind has never before been done in Jamaica. So instead of the employee looking at what he or she has received in the context of what he or has received or she has received in the past, persons begin to compare with their perception or what they've heard of the circumstances of others without full information. Madam Speaker, in previous settlements over the past decade between 2012-2013 and 21-22, public sector salaries have been adjusted by 0%, 0%, 0%, 4%, 4%, 5%, 2%, 4%, 5%, 4%. Madam Speaker, that totals 28% if you add it up on gross salaries. If you compound it, you get 31.6%. Madam Speaker, in this new compensation restructuring, the overwhelming majority of public officers have received or will be receiving adjustments in compensation over the implementation period, which exceed what they would have received across the last 10 years combined. And many in the first year will receive increases that are higher than the last 10 years combined. Let me be more definitive, Madam Speaker. Wages and salaries will increase by more in this public sector restructuring than it has increased in dollar terms over the previous decade. And I have the figures for you to see. Okay, Madam Speaker, the increase in this year alone is $102.7 billion. Last year, for the entire public service, it was 18.7 billion. The year before, 11 billion. The year before, 11 billion. The year before, 7 billion. The year before that, 14 billion. The year before that, 10 billion. Before that, 10 billion. The year before that, 2 billion. 9 billion. 8 billion. You get the point. Okay? Now, there are some complications about where allowances are so on, but the point is there. Now, when you add up everything over those 10 years, Madam Speaker, you get 102.2 billion over those 10 years. And this year, you have 102.8. This is a quick analysis, Madam Speaker, but the point is unmistakably clear of the effort the government is making, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, this just represents the first year of the public sector restructuring. But somehow, Madam Speaker, this perspective has been lost as individuals compare with other individuals, which I guess is human nature, and groups compare with groups. But if we are self-conscious about human nature, we can observe, Madam Speaker, and recognize it as human to compare, but not get lost in it, Madam Speaker. Not get lost in it. Because 102 billion in 1 year, Madam Speaker, so I just want to share, Madam Speaker, that when you see a fourth supplementary budget where capital expenditure is sacrificed to accommodate wages, Madam Speaker, alarm bells ought to go off in the society because that is unsustainable. The cannibalization of capital expenditures to support wages is where Jamaica is coming from. 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that has led to underdevelopment. And nobody wants to go there again. Now, to be clear, Madam Speaker, in this instance, capital projects from which expenditure has been reallocated were capital projects that had fallen behind in execution for reasons unrelated to wages. And the funds were not going to be spent in this fiscal year anyway, and that's another issue. However, it does not change the fact that the wages could only be accommodated by having taken amounts originally allocated for capital. Now, Madam Speaker, capital expenditure is a major contributor to improving quality of life. No matter what your income is, if you don't have quality parks, you don't have quality garbage trucks, or hospitals, clinics, schools, police stations, roads, tax offices, garbage, sewer, water, your quality of life suffers. And a sensitive point, Madam Speaker, but I mean it with the best of intentions. I'm sharing my heart. Let us always remember that the numbers of the poor and the working classes exceed the numbers in the public service by 10 to 1. Jamaica is a democracy, Madam Speaker. Maybe not by 5 to 1, probably. Jamaica is a democracy and everyone counts. And we need space to accommodate everyone's needs. Madam Speaker, it is the poor and working classes that benefit disproportionately from certain categories of public expenditure, which have the capacity to improve lives. These include public transportation through buses, sanitation through the acquisition of garbage trucks, better public health care through improved hospitals, better equipped public schools, and improved security through more police stations and more cars for the police. Public investment expenditure in roadways and highways also generate jobs for many. And Madam Speaker, our capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP is only about 2.2 or 2.3% of GDP. We need it to be at 5% of GDP if we are to achieve our own ambitions. The network of infrastructure that we have to replace, not just uptown, but downtown, in rural areas, in communities across the country. Madam Speaker, we need capital expenditure to do that. And Madam Speaker, while we need to attract and retain talent in the public sector, it's neither just nor equitable that public compensation be pushed to levels that compromise public investment expenditure. We have to maintain a certain level of public investment, and we're only at 2.2. We need to get all the way up. Madam Speaker, if we are to have a Jamaica where we truly have equality of opportunity, which everybody says that they want, Madam Speaker, the connection between public investment expenditure and equality of opportunity is that we have the ability, Madam Speaker, to put a good school in every neighborhood, to put a good hospital in every community, Madam Speaker, to make sure that the garbage truck doesn't only go uptown, but it goes downtown, Madam Speaker. To make sure, Madam Speaker, that we have sewage and water going to communities across, to squatter communities and others. We cannot do that, Madam Speaker, without elevated levels of public investment expenditure. So all those who are interested in the pursuit of equal opportunity for all, Madam Speaker, join with this government as we, Madam Speaker, try to elevate public investment in this country. Equality of opportunity cannot be achieved without public investment expenditure. So, Madam Speaker, we need a public compensation system that is fiscally sustainable and compatible with increased levels of public investment. Madam Speaker, this year, compensation is projected to be 11.7% of GDP. Wow. Remember, we had a 9% rule. Wow. Now, comparing like for like, because we had some allowances in programs, it would be about 10.6% the comparison of GDP. Madam Speaker, inclusive amounts allocated in the first to fourth supplementary estimates, approximately 79.4 billion, Madam Speaker, has been provided, Madam Speaker. And if these amounts remain unpaid over the next few weeks, meeting, Madam Speaker, the targets that we have, our legislation does not leave room to accommodate these amounts in the next fiscal year. We already have a full $1 trillion of expenditure program for next year, inclusive of the second year payments. And that this is not it's just my responsibility as Minister of Finance to be open with information. The space does not exist for the government to pay both the first year restructured salaries and the second year restructured salaries at the same time. As such, Madam Speaker, for fiscal sustainability, we'll have no choice to pay these amounts over several years, commencing in 2024-25. Madam Speaker, I wanted to share some of the figures because I know one of the challenges that we have had is that it's a complicated reform. And the way things work, we engage with union, staff associations, and bargaining groups, and they communicate with their members. A reform as complicated as this, sometimes things have gotten lost in translation, and sometimes members don't have the data and information. Now, it's not possible because of the complexity of the old compensation system to discuss details in public because everybody's situation is different. When you have 325 grades and 185 allowances, just imagine that matrix. There's room for 30,000 possibilities. You understand? So I know everybody's asking why you doing, it's not something that you can come out and talk about because everybody's circumstances are a little different. Going to the new compensation system, which is much more standardized and simple, we can have that conversation. 1 to 16, very easy to understand. But by sharing the aggregate numbers, Madam Speaker, I hope that helps in understanding. Madam Speaker, we have allocated $10.2 billion. We have it on hand for rank and file police officers. $10.2 billion. That is how much, on top of what they have received already for this year, that is how much is in the budget, Madam Speaker, for them to receive in March if, Madam Speaker, we can come to some agreement or arrangement. $10.2 billion. Now, Madam Speaker, there was a previous $10 billion that never went through. I say, Madam Speaker, to rank and file members of the police force, please allow us to pay you the $10.2 billion that we have for you. Madam Speaker, there's an additional $1 billion for district constables and $600 million for members of the Police Officers Association. That's $11.8 billion that is ready to go. Madam Speaker, the total amount that we have for teachers is approximately $12 billion that we have, is budgeted for, is provided for. It sits waiting for you, Madam Speaker, if you just give me the permission, Madam Speaker, through agreement to give it to you. We have $12 billion that we want to get to the teachers of Jamaica, Madam Speaker, and I appeal to you. Madam Speaker, the total amount that we have for doctors is $6.4 billion. And we want the doctors to receive these amounts in March of 2023. Madam Speaker, we want to be in a position for these amounts to leave the consolidated funds in March of 2023. These amounts alone total $30 billion. And this size of payment, Madam Speaker, cannot be accommodated in the next fiscal year, as I mentioned. And somehow, Madam Speaker, with the huge numbers that were swung around in COVID, remember that COVID was a time of huge swings. We lost $75 billion of revenue. Then we got back $100 billion and a supplementary come and there's 40. Somehow we have lost sensitivity to the numbers. Yeah? We have lost sensitivity to the numbers. I want to just remind, Madam Speaker, just put up that chart, $11.8 billion that we have in store for just the members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, as well as district constables, exceeds the total increase enjoyed by all public sector workers in each year. Look at the chart, 2021, 2020-21, 2019-20, 2018-19, 2016-17, 2015-16, 2014-15, 2013-14, 2012-13. For every year of the last 10 years except one. Except two, 21-22 and 2017-18. For 8 of the last 10 years, Madam Speaker, the amount that we have to go to police officers alone exceeds the total amount, Madam Speaker, that went to public officers. Madam Speaker, the $12 billion approximately that we have in store to pay out to members of the teaching profession in March, Madam Speaker, exceeds the total increase enjoyed by all 110,000 public sector workers in 8 of the last 10 years. That is the volume that we're talking about. Madam Speaker, I've presented, Madam Speaker, these facts. Madam Speaker, I've personally participated in what seems like hundreds of meetings in person, virtually, on the phone, WhatsApp calls, on the weekend, morning, noon, and night. And Madam Speaker, I hope for the sake of our country that partisan politics is not weaving its way in. And I say that not because of speculation, but because of things that have been revealed in our media and on social media in recent days. And Madam Speaker, that would be most unfortunate because we have these resources. Never before, Madam Speaker, has a police officer received what they're about to receive in March, if right? And same for teachers. Larger than any kind of back pay before. Larger than, as I said, even over a number of years if you combine everything. Now, Madam Speaker, I've presented the facts. Madam Speaker, what more, Madam Speaker, ought I do? Should I, for example, put at risk all the progress that Jamaica has made? After sharing, Madam Speaker, that the significance of the amounts in the context of Jamaica's finances and Jamaica's recent economic history, should I seek to reverse the economic gains made through mutual sacrifice? Madam Speaker, we've put together a package that is larger than what has been implemented over the last 10 years combined. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, doctors, police, I know that you deserve more. I know that. If I talk about what people deserve, I know you deserve more. Everybody who leave Jamaica's shores end up earning more. But the truth is, at this time, in the context of the significance of the monies committed, we cannot do any more. Madam Speaker, we can't reach the promised land in one step. There will be another opportunity before too long to work together on achieving some of the outstanding goals. Madam Speaker, my mother was a teacher for nearly 20 years in Kingston and in rural Jamaica. She spent a decade of those 20 years as a classroom teacher. I am a classroom teacher's son. I know my Speaker, I know as a student and as a son that what the classroom teacher does is extraordinary. Madam Speaker, it is in fact, it's magical. Magical. How does one weigh and measure the ability to inspire? Madam Speaker, my mother not only taught for 20 years, but she worked in the public service for her entire working life. In her time, there were many instances when back pay was 2 years, 3 years, 4 years delayed. And we had to postpone decisions in my house because of that. I am a back pay baby. Madam Speaker, I know the impact on a family. And Madam Speaker, we do not want to go back to that time of back pay being paid over years. So, Madam Speaker, I've presented facts, and I appeal for reasonableness. I appeal for the sake of Jamaica for reasonableness. Madam Speaker, I want to share a little bit about the complexity of the reform. It's a compensation restructuring that maps an old compensation system into a new one with an entirely differential impact as I described. And there's no precedent for it in Jamaica. In fact, there's scarcely a precedent for doing it all at once. And this is not a one-size-fits-all uniform fixed increase. And the differential dynamics, as I described earlier, Madam Speaker, probably explains why that happened before, because previous governments would have probably viewed it as too risky. But Madam Speaker, this government has taken the view that we cannot leave these major legacy issues as we saw them. We have to have the courage to resolve them. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to just illustrate something so that we can understand. I brought with me I want to just illustrate the numbers. And I have these abacus with my speaker, if I can. All right, so if I may, Madam Speaker, help me. So, yes, I'm going to get it right, don't worry. So, Madam Speaker, there are 40 public sector unions and 140 public bodies. That totals 180. I give you approximate numbers. This abacus has 200, 10 on each row. So 100 in this one, 200 in this. Okay, approximately 180. Now, Madam Speaker, normally what would happen in a wage negotiation is that you agree the number with the Confederation, because the Confederation represents, the unions represent nearly 50% of public sector workers, right? And it's 11 unions in the Confederation. Once you agree it, then for the union, for the public bodies they represent, you just apply that from behind across all the public bodies. And then you go and talk to other unions. Now, in a restructuring, that's not the case. You have to go union, not only union by union, but public body by public body. Now, Madam Speaker, the 11 unions in the, this is 10, call them over here. The 11 unions in the Confederation represent 50% of the public service, approximately, rough number. So everybody else here constitutes the other 50%. Now, Madam Speaker, though we'd have wanted it earlier, we achieved agreement with the Confederation in November of 2022. So with these 11. And by December, we had another, giving you rough numbers, 10, 12 unions joined. So that's 20 here. That's the end of November, including, I think the nurses were in there. So here, we had 60% of the public sector with approximately 20 agreements. But the remaining 40% of the public sector, Madam Speaker, we had 100, approximately rough numbers, approximately 160 entities to engage with between December and March. This is the complexity that we're talking about. Now, Madam Speaker, when it came to certain executive agencies were paid at a premium to the civil service. And they believe, and they have a good argument, that that premium should remain. But it came into direct conflict with one of the objectives of the exercise, that we should have uniformity across the public service. And Speaker, maybe uniformity is going to be achieved at another time, because the executive agencies were adamant that they wanted to maintain a premium. So this was not about, for many people, not just an increase, but to make sure that their increase was such that they remained above. It's about comparison. So, and then, Madam Speaker, in addition, so, Madam Speaker, so Madam Speaker, as we progressed, you would have seen things spill over into the public domain. But when you see, and here we're having a transparent conversation, you saw customs and TAJ, you saw GIS, you saw RGD, you saw, movement of NWA. Those are all executive agencies, okay? But you put the finger on the number of things spilling over. You're talking about maybe 10 out of the entire group of public bodies. But the context is not apparent in the newspaper or on the television screen, that we're talking to all of these. But this is where the trouble is, right? Now, Madam Speaker, so it's important to understand it in its context. So, Madam Speaker, we have nevertheless proceeded to work, and the members of the Transformation Implementation Unit and the Ministry of Finance have been working assiduously despite setbacks. And, Madam Speaker, we have completed agreements, Madam Speaker, in terms of public service. We have there We have done that. We have done that. We have done that. We have done that. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, Madam Speaker, 90, 100, 110, Madam Speaker, and a few more unions. Now remember that, so Madam Speaker, that is what we have completed. Now remember, it stops here, right? It's not the whole thing. So Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that as at today, we have agreement, Madam Speaker, as at 2 p.m. today. We have agreement, Madam Speaker, with 110 public bodies, Madam Speaker, of the 140. Right? 110. And Madam Speaker, that 110 represents, Madam Speaker, the ones that are outstanding mostly are self-financing public bodies that are not dependent on the consolidated fund, or some very small, highly specialized entities, which don't pose a fiscal risk to the government. So I just wanted to report on that progress. I know that members would want to know. So, Madam Speaker, we are making steady progress, Madam Speaker, despite what the challenges that we have had. Now, the investment being made in the public sector, Madam Speaker, will demand better performance, better service, and better results. It cannot be business as usual. And we hope to work with our partners in the unions on a performance management component to be implemented in April 2025. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to turn my attention to the long-standing issue of fixed-term contracts in government. First, let me acknowledge that fixed-term contracts have their rightful place. They are useful for employment that is designed to be temporary in nature. They're also useful in executive appointments. Over the last 3 decades or so, ministry departments and agencies, there's been a growing tendency for the abuse of fixed-term contracts outside of the establishment as a method of staffing organizations. And sometimes this happens because an organization in the public service expands its services and it needs more staff, and rather than going through the established route, it short circuits that route and hires people on contract, and that is never a redress. A redress is never brought. Madam Speaker, in all these instances, the entity is operationalized before the requisite approvals. And sometimes organizations have been unable to recruit due to the rate of pay, and so they employ by contract at a higher rate. In many of these instances, Madam Speaker, the worker is disadvantaged with inferior access to benefits, and this has been the status quo for decades. So, Madam Speaker, in the health sector, we have approximately 1,704 doctors, yet the establishment today only stands at 509. More than 2/3 are on evergreen, consistently renewable contracts. In the Ministry of Education, we have approximately 8,000 workers on contract. The Ministry of Local Government has several thousand more in municipalities. And there are several public bodies. There are public bodies, Madam Speaker, it may surprise you, where every single employee is on a short-term contract. Now, Madam Speaker, I must acknowledge, and sometimes it's dangerous to single out a person, but this is my personal experience. The president of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, Mr. O'Neill Grant, who has consistently raised this matter in a number of fora over several years. And at all such instances, I've given a commitment to address this issue. Madam Speaker, it is a big, big problem. The problem started more than 3 decades ago and has grown bigger every year. We did not start the problem, Madam Speaker, but this government will begin and advance the process to address this problem. Madam Speaker, in sharing the gains of economic reform and recovery, the government will regularize evergreen, consistently renewed contract workers, Madam Speaker, and move them into structured employment. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service through its strategic human resource department, will move to address the situation, Madam Speaker. The problem is so large and complex that it cannot all be fixed at once. And under the reform of contract work in the public sector program, we will approach this in a phased basis, working on 1 or 2 years at a time until we accomplish the task. And we will engage with our union partners in developing a realistic timeline. Madam Speaker, one of the places we will begin with the reform for contract work in the public sector is in the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, commendations to the Minister of Education, the Honorable Favour Williams, who presented the Ministry of Finance with an audit of the employment practices in her ministry that allows for the regularization that I'm about to highlight. Madam Speaker, from time to time, due to policy changes or new policy directives, staff have been hired in infant, primary, and secondary schools to bring about fulfillment of policy objectives. Over a long period of time, on account of speed of implementation, procedures have not been observed, and we have now over 8,522 persons employed in our education institutions without a postcode assigned. In other words, we have 8,522 contract workers. At the same time, the audit found that there were 4,460 vacant posts, of which 636 were recommended to be abolished. So I give you a couple of examples, Madam Speaker. Across the 7 regions, there are approximately 716 cooks and 52 assistant cooks who are presently employed on contract without postcodes. Cooks at the primary level are usually engaged on contract, and they work for periods when schools are in session. And based on this arrangement, they're not eligible for pension even after 10 to 20 years, Madam Speaker. This government is going to resolve this long-standing issue. We'll create the postcodes required to elevate 716 cooks and assistant cooks in our school system from contract work to permanent employment, Madam Speaker. Cooks and assistant cooks are people too. And it is full, they put in, once they are full-time, put in a full week's work, Madam Speaker, they deserve to be pensionable too. It's only fair and it's only right. Madam Speaker, there are 367 regular watchmen who are working in our schools, who are working on contract and without postcodes. We will create postcodes required to elevate 367 regular school watchmen who work full-time hours to elevate them, Madam Speaker, from contract work to permanent work, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in our school system, we have 659 caregivers in our infant schools who are on contract work. We will elevate them, Madam Speaker, to permanent employment, Madam Speaker. And I could go on. Suffice to say that there are over 8,000 just in the school system alone. And this government, Madam Speaker, will bring long-awaited reform in this area and improve the lives, Madam Speaker, as we share the gains. Now, Madam Speaker, just one more. I have a special relationship with the Minister of Local Government, Honorable Desmond McKenzie, a man with a heart for and loyalty to the people. Through this relationship, I've come into knowledge of and observed for myself a special group who have been wronged for far too long. And this government will respond to their cry for justice. I am speaking about workers at the National Solid Waste Management Agency. Madam Speaker, workers at the NSWMA are literally working permanently whilst on short-term contract. Madam Speaker, sanitation workers, you see them in the rain? Yes. You see them on the truck back? Yes. You see them in the sun, Madam Speaker, taking up stuff and throwing it into the truck? Then jump off, Madam Speaker, then take up the rubbish and move on to the next gate. You see the passion that they put into their job, Madam Speaker. when COVID a bite and everybody at turn of your yard will look through your window and there is a sanitation worker, Madam Speaker, putting stuff into the back of the truck. These are unsung heroes of our country, Madam Speaker, and the country owes them a debt of gratitude. Madam Speaker, we have a duty to give them justice. We have just under 2,000 workers. That includes sidemen, drivers, side women, landfill workers, sweepers, mechanics, yeah? All what them call the enforcement officers, and the other sanitation workers. You know, the enforcement officers dress up and then fine you, Madam Speaker. One of the innovations, Madam Speaker, Audley Gordon deserves a lot of credit for the reforms he has brought. For years, they've had this contracted employment. Contract end, they break. They go back home, they wait for a call, the call takes long to come. Madam Speaker, they get frustrated. They can't plan. Madam Speaker, it was the wise Jamaican philosopher Dennis Brown in his song, Equal Rights, who said, and I won't test my singing voice today, because he said, because every man has an equal right to live and be free, no matter what the color or class or race he may be. Remember how we are all flesh and blood. Lift up your brother. Do not push him in the mud. Madam Speaker, no financial institution takes sanitation workers seriously. They can't sustain any savings. As you put out little money, so your contract end, you use it, you broke. And then them call you back at work. And as you quit your eye, the contract done again. And the cycle go round and round, year after year, decade after decade. But we tell you something, Madam Speaker, the cycle done now. None of us here, Madam Speaker, would ever want to live like this, Madam Speaker. This has gone on for years and decades. Lots of talk and empty promises, lots of hopes dashed. It's not right. Not right. As a country, we cannot leave this important category of worker behind. It's time to stop chatting and do something. It's time to right the wrong. Madam Speaker, today I'm announcing a major shift in how we treat this important category of the public sector workforce. Madam Speaker, in fiscal year 2023-24, we will make sanitation workers at the National Solid Waste Management Agency who have completed the necessary probationary periods into permanent employees. That is what you call authenticity, Madam Speaker. Authenticity. Madam Speaker, I want to be identified as the finance minister under the government of Andrew Holness. And this government wants to be recognized as the one that made things right with Jamaican sanitation workers and others in the contract category. Madam Speaker, when we share the gains of economic reform and economic recovery, Madam Speaker, Jamaica is better off. We're using hiring policy. Hiring policy to drive social change in our country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are approximately 1,754 doctors, and as I mentioned earlier, 80% of doctors in the public service are on contract and have to be periodically renewed. And after all those years in medical school, the vast majority of our doctors do not have security of tenure. Madam Speaker, we came here and saw this problem, which has existed for decades, remained unresolved, and it hampers the delivery of healthcare. And it has gotten worse over time. Madam Speaker, we'll fix that one too. The suboptimal arrangement for doctors in the public service and contract for extended periods of time will be brought to an end by this government. I cannot in this speech address all of the instances of contract work in government in need of reform. In this House, the temporary employment of drivers and constituency secretaries is often associated with MPs is often mentioned, and other egregious cases also exist. Under the reform of contract work in the public sector program, we will dimension the problem, Madam Speaker, and detail the phased implementation of solutions for all. We aim to complete the implementation of the reform for contract work in the public sector within a 3-year period, concluding in the fiscal year 2025-26. Now, Madam Speaker, sometimes every time you try to do good, there are always arguments from people who walk past the problem, chat past the problem, but never actually solve the problem. And Madam Speaker, we are doing something about it. I am not finished yet. I'll have more to say about this. The journey of 1,000 miles, Madam Speaker, begins with the first step. Now, Madam Speaker, this government that I've had the privilege to serve as Minister of Finance has always prioritized the lives of the Jamaican people with a view to improving their living standards and to allow them to lead more meaningful lives. Madam Speaker, we know that, as Buju Banton says, it's a competitive world for low-budget people, earning a dime while spending a nickel. As such, Madam Speaker, the last increase under the minimum wage in 2022 was the single largest increase in the entire history of the Minimum Wage Act. I am told by the minimum wage head of the Minimum Wage Commission, from $7,000 to $9,000. As the minimum wage was only changed 1 year ago, many minimum wage earners are concerned and anxious as to whether they'll have to wait another year or two for another increase. And Madam Speaker, we know times are tough, and we know in today's Jamaica that though there was an increase just a year ago, that $9,000 is an insufficient amount to live on in Jamaica today, especially after the inflation shock of last year. My colleague, the Minister of Labor and Social Security, call him the Emperor, who is my neighbor many times over, is seized of this, I assure you. We work closely together, Madam Speaker. And as Minister Samuda advised the Standing Finance Committee, the report from the National Minimum Wage Advisory Council has been recently submitted to him. And Madam Speaker, the Minister of Labor is the only person by law and by convention who announces the new rate of minimum wage. As such, Madam Speaker, he will announce the rate, but I will speak to the date. Madam Speaker, Minister Samuda has agreed for me to tell you that he will announce the new minimum wage in a few weeks, in April 2023. And when he does, he will have the concurrence of the cabinet. Minimum wage earners, therefore, Madam Speaker, can look forward to a meaningful increase, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we seek to expand the gains, we seek to improve service delivery in the economy. And one of those areas is the modernization of the Customs Act. The Joint Select Committee returned its work to Parliament. 1,000 pages were considered, Madam Speaker, and 281 clauses, 4 schedules with 663 pages. Madam Speaker, there's still work to be done because we had promised to have the regulations in Parliament at the same time we debate the bill. Early in the new fiscal year, I hope that we will be able to bring the debate, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government, Madam Speaker, realizes the importance of venture capital and angel investors for early stage businesses. And we have advanced reforms, Madam Speaker, to ensure that there is sufficient early stage capital in Jamaica. Never before have we had, the proliferation of angel investors that we have now. And the government of Jamaica has set up a sidecar angel fund capitalized with 232 million to invest alongside angel investors, sometimes in pre-revenue companies, which is a historical first for Jamaica. Madam Speaker, through the efforts of the DBJ, supported by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Sector and the World Bank, there are 3 small and medium-sized private equity funds that have been established with a total in capitalization of $5.3 billion, Madam Speaker, with $1.775 billion from the government of Jamaica. And there are 3, Madam Speaker, and you can pick, choose, and refuse. Madam Speaker, I'm also pleased to report that through the policies of this government, there's a total capitalization of $13 billion in private equity and venture funds available to Jamaican businesses, primarily small and medium-sized businesses. And here we're talking about funds that the government would have catalyzed, not the purely private sector ones. And Madam Speaker, through the Biggie program that we have worked on with the IDB and with the IE and with the European Union, there's an innovation grant fund, a patent grant fund, 3 incubators, 2 accelerators. And incubators are programs that provide training and mentorship to young businesses. And over 100 startup companies are going to be eligible and have been in this program. And there are 2 accelerator programs expected to provide services to 100 scalable Jamaican startups. There's never been a better time to be an ambitious entrepreneur, especially a young entrepreneur in Jamaica. Madam Speaker, expanding the gains requires a diversification of the Jamaican economy, as well as a broader base of industries with the capacity to generate foreign exchange. And we have developed a venture capital and private equity ecosystem with this in mind. One area that could achieve both ends, which is diversification and foreign exchange, is the film, television industry and screen production industry. Just last week, Madam Speaker, the film Raw Materials, which is locally produced, and it's a short film, qualified for an Oscar nomination, Madam Speaker. This is the first time that a local produced film has earned this distinction. And on behalf of the Parliament, we send congratulations to Icon Media, who I understand are behind the film. Madam Speaker, this development makes the point very well. Expanding the gains requires a diversification of the Jamaican economy. And one area that could achieve is this. Creative content production has significant potential to contribute to Jamaica's economy and to GDP growth. Film and television production involves employment of skilled production crew, technicians, support and logistics staff, and behind the camera and talented cast. Hundreds of persons can be employed in a single production, sometimes for months. In addition, the production of film and television generates indirect and spin-off economic activity. Madam Speaker, Bollywood in India and Nollywood in Nigeria have demonstrated the economic and social power of film and television. Madam Speaker, those populations can sustain their content within their borders, whereas we cannot. We need the export markets. Film industry, though, has been growing rapidly with the advance of technology, inclusive of the internet and streaming, and all distribution models have been disrupted. This changes the power dynamic between content creators and distributors. Madam Speaker, the international demand for niche content for all film and television production exist, and Jamaican stories are in demand. And Madam Speaker, the film starts with a story, and we have great stories, and Jamaican content is high in demand, and the project pipeline is deep. However, existing support for film and television development is far too limited, and a major challenge is access to finance. Madam Speaker, the government of Jamaica will continue to support the growth of a local television, film, and animation industry. And Madam Speaker, working with the Ministry of Industry and Investment and Commerce, and in particular, the Minister of Industry and Environment and Commerce, the Honorable Orbin Hill, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, in its partnership, will provide, Madam Speaker, an initial amount of $1 billion over 2 years, with $500 million in 23-24 in financing for the establishment of the Jamaica Screen Fund. Madam Speaker, that fund will provide grants for the development of film and television shows, and it will facilitate the creative, devoting time and sweat equity to developing the project to the point where it can receive financing. And an example of a deliverable would be, for example, writing a feature script, or producing a short film, or writing a TV series pilot script, or producing a teaser video for a concept for an animation. The Jamaica Screen Fund will also support production of films locally by defined percentage of production costs up to a maximum contribution for local productions, with other percentages and thresholds for foreign films being shot in Jamaica once certain criteria are met. The Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce will be responsible for the governance arrangements, which will be multi-stakeholder in orientation. And at a later date, Minister, the Honorable Orbin Hill, will publish the rules regarding the Jamaica Screen Fund, along with guidance on how to access grants and financing, inclusive of what is expected of writers, creatives, and production companies who receive support. I should add, Madam Speaker, that the Jamaica Screen Fund will not be a physical fund with the administrative burden that this entails. Rather, resources will be retained with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to be drawn down in tranches once the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce approves eligible projects that have completed and fulfilled application requirements. The government of Jamaica is serious about diversifying the economy and serious about supporting the growth of emerging sectors, which bolster brand Jamaica and the creativity of our people. Is yet another way to share the gains, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, over 1,000 micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises benefited from loan guarantees under the GOJ Credit Enhancement Facility, and over 248 MSMEs were supported through DBJ's voucher and technical assistance. Yet another way of our commitment, Madam Speaker, and there, other programs from MSME, Madam Speaker, will be announced. Madam Speaker, we are pursuing amendments to the Large-Scale Projects and Pioneer Industries Act to operationalize and attract billion-dollar investments, and I hope to be in a position to table this bill during the month of April of 2023, though it could slip to May. Madam Speaker, the Harmony Cove project is a $1.3 billion luxury joint venture development, and that number, $1.3 billion, is across 2 phases, $925 million in the first phase. The project is a joint venture between the government of Jamaica and Tavistock, conceived nearly 2 decades ago. And the project has been frustrated by a number of factors over many years. But, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to report that the project is back on track, and we are fully committed to ensuring that it becomes a reality. Madam Speaker, Harmonization Limited, the government entity, established a partner with Tavistock, and Tavistock are expected to reach a definitive binding agreement in the 2023-24 fiscal year. This definitive binding agreement would replace all prior agreements. And as of now, the timelines, Madam Speaker, would be once the government completes its conditions precedent to closing, there'll be a final financing round, and the design phase will begin, leading to construction drawings and groundbreaking. After that, our expectation that the agreement is signed and made effective during the upcoming fiscal year will allow a year for that design and construction and that design and drawings and subdivision approvals, Madam Speaker, to take place for the project to then commence in the 25-26 fiscal year. The structure of the agreement, Madam Speaker, is such that once the GOJ completes its conditions precedent there will be legal consequences for Tavistock if it subsequently does not meet its obligations under the revised agreement. Madam Speaker, once we reach a definitive binding agreement, the government will do everything in its power to fulfill its obligations. Madam Speaker, we launched an RFP for an integrated resort development. An enterprise team was appointed, and I'm pleased to update the House that the enterprise team has recommended, Madam Speaker, that an integrated resort development license be issued. And we're going through the final stages, Madam Speaker, of formalizing that process. And I'll be saying more about it earlier. Suffice to say that the recommended award, these project during construction is assessed to be providing upwards of 1,500 jobs, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, last year the BOJ introduced a digital currency to deepen financial inclusion, and they had a phased rollout of Jamdex across 2022. As of February 18, 2023, a total of 190,000 persons were onboarded onto the link platform that uses where Jamdex is available. And of this, Madam Speaker, we have 185,000 individuals, 90 small merchants, and 4,500 micro merchants. And the total transaction activity for 2022 was $357 million. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, in addition to the government announced an incentive for persons to sign up to be Jamdex wallet holders, where we would provide 100,000 customers, the first 100,000 with $2,500 for their account. I'm pleased to report that this incentive received 100% take-up by the end of June 2022 and created 100,000 Jamdex wallet holders. Madam Speaker, we introduced another incentive last year for the first 100,000 customers who sign up for low KYC, low Know Your Customer accounts to receive $2,500. Madam Speaker, we had a take-up of 36,000, which is not good enough. And so, again, I extend the incentive this year, Madam Speaker, for a further year. The first 60,000 customers who sign up for low KYC accounts at any commercial bank after April 1st, 2023, will receive a grant from the government of $2,500 into that account. Now, to increase the usage of Jamdex, Madam Speaker, we have to make sure that small merchants offer to accept Jamdex in their businesses. That is how usage will be accelerated. And we want to target small merchants by providing them with an incentive. And these are merchants who are registered as businesses and operate in industries such as restaurants, gas stations, personal care, etc., etc. And I want to announce, Madam Speaker, that the first 10,000 merchants onboarded onto Jamdex as of 1st of April 2023 and after will receive $25,000 of Jamdex upon registration and onboarding. And for that registration, they have to, provide. This is government money, so we're going to need, registration certificates of incorporation, and they'll need even a low KYC account or some other bank account and a valid, some evidence of being compliant. And merchants who are onboarded will also receive a Jamdex accepted here sticker for display at their locations. Madam Speaker, we'll also introduce a wallet loyalty program where individuals who spend using Jamdex will receive 2% cash back up to $5,000 of expenditure every month, Madam Speaker. And this is an incentive that will be offered only in 2023-24. And the idea is to encourage persons to use Jamdex wherever the opportunity to use it is available. Madam Speaker, we share the gains by pursuing multiple channels of enhancing education, training, and human capital development. Over the Student Loan Bureau continues its mission to finance students pursuing tertiary education across 34 institutions. During 2022-23, 7,000 student loan customers benefited from a 2.2% point reduction in the interest rate on their loan by remaining current with the SLB. And by adjusting the payment allocation policy to apply payments to the oldest bill first, delinquency rates have improved by 2.2%. Madam Speaker, the SLB has implemented a new loan management system, which means that loans can be processed online, applications are online, and supporting documents can be uploaded online. There's no need to come into any office. And that online customer portal is interactive and it simplifies the application process. Madam Speaker, and it will also allow, once it's fully implemented in 23-24, online loan repayment, online loan balance request, online loan statements. No need to even call. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that for the 2023-24 year, students from PATH households or from households with income less than 1.5 million, the Student Loan Bureau plans to make an additional 4,200 non-refundable grants of $60,000 to PATH households and low-income customers. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to update the House that last year, or over the last year, the Student Loan Bureau increased its customers from the category of wards of the state from 46 to 98 in a single year, Madam Speaker. Increase of over 100%. And that was a result of the no guarantor policy for wards of the state. Madam Speaker, this is what happens when you share the benefits. With this success, Madam Speaker, we will extend our no guarantor policy to include all students from PATH households. Effective for the new school year beginning September, Madam Speaker, students from PATH households who apply to the Student Loan Bureau will not need to provide any guarantors. No guarantors for PATH students. And in addition, we'll waive the application fee for students from PATH households. Madam Speaker, we are preserving, maintaining, increasing, and sharing the gains of economic reform and economic recovery. Madam Speaker, the government of Jamaica established the Marcus Garvey Public Sector Graduate Scholarship, which is now in its third year, Human Capital Development Program. And Madam Speaker, lots of young people are applying. The median age is 31. And we have allocated 43 scholarships over the last 2 years. Madam Speaker, it so happens, I have to update the House, I'm very pleased that from the first cohort of awardees, 2 Marcus Garvey Public Sector Scholars have since graduated in 2022, one who completed a master's degree from Oxford University and who is employed to the Jamaica Defense Force, and another who completed a master's degree at Harvard University, who is from the teaching profession. And I congratulate them both. In addition, Madam Speaker, we have a medical doctor pursuing master's degree in public health at Johns Hopkins University, and 2 other public officials to go to Johns Hopkins University in July of 2023. All of these courtesy of the government's Marcus Garvey Public Sector Graduate Scholarship. Madam Speaker, the government of Jamaica is sending its employees to some of the best universities in the world. Harvard University, Oxford University, Johns Hopkins, and right here in Jamaica too, University of the West Indies and UTEC. The main thematic areas have been economics and national security, law, public policy. Marcus Garvey, Madam Speaker, once said, "It is by education that we become prepared for our duties and our responsibilities in life." And I congratulate all Marcus Garvey scholars. Madam Speaker, Jamaica seeks to accelerate our pace of growth. And we want to have a proficient technically proficient workforce that can sustain higher value-added investment jobs. We're in a world where robotics and artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and genetics and biochemistry promise to reshape our world in profound ways. The Internet of Things promises a world that's fully integrated with computer science. Jamaica must increase its level of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics attainment not to be left behind. But STEM is more than just the 4 subjects. It embodies a new methodology in which teachers are required to adjust their pedagogical approach, Madam Speaker. Jamaica's forward-thinking education transformation plan recognizes this paradigm shift with the Prime Minister's introduction of STEM schools. And we must begin to prepare ourselves through the deliberate and urgent supply of well-trained teachers with the skills and values to drive this STEM implementation across all schools. Madam Speaker, we need a special program because the reality is, again, formulating policy out of our own reality. The reality is that only 15% of CSEC graduates today are qualified, of cohorts are qualified to sit STEM subjects. And only a small fraction of those will be qualified for teacher training. And, Madam Speaker, we have statistics that demand attention. We must fill the math and science teaching and learning gaps, Madam Speaker. And this will power a new school that the Prime Minister is working on in conjunction with the Minister of Education. In response to that need, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance, through the Student Loan Bureau, in support of this government effort, will partner with the Jamaica University College, the oldest teacher training college in the Western Hemisphere, to provide full tuition scholarships to 1,250 STEM teachers over the next 5 years. That is 250 full tuition STEM teacher scholarships over the next 5 years. Madam Speaker, the University of Technology is the largest source of work-ready science, technology, engineering, and math graduates in Jamaica. Under the leadership of its new chancellor, Mr. Lloyd Carney, a successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur, this competence will only grow and the STEM output will only increase. UTech is uniquely positioned to anchor itself and build out Jamaica's knowledge process outsourcing and information technology sectors, Madam Speaker, and with IT-enabled business services that drive data analytics through machine learning and artificial intelligence, software development, information security, etc., engineering sciences, cybersecurity, etc. And, Madam Speaker, they have labs at UTech that provide ready-to-work experience. Madam Speaker, through the Student Loan Bureau, the Ministry of Finance and Public Service will support Jamaica's goals and UTech's ambitions at the same time and ensure that those who can least afford are not left behind. We'll do so by providing the UTech with a total of 1,000 STEM scholarships over the next 5 years, Madam Speaker. Those STEM scholarships will be used to support Jamaicans from low-income households. We need to broaden our economic base, Madam Speaker, and if we have sufficient numbers of qualified STEM students here trained in the latest technologies, Madam Speaker, though some may leave, and these will be obviously with some kind of bonding requirement, the presence of that talent here will attract investment, Madam Speaker, higher paying jobs, higher valued added jobs, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, our AML CFT reforms are very important and we have to meet certain deadlines in this month of March. And the Ministry of Industry and Commerce is leading the effort to table the amendments to the Companies Act. Madam Speaker, I now turn to this year's budget. The central government expenditure of $1,021.7 billion or $1.0217 trillion, and that's $1 trillion with a capital T, is comprised of non-debt expenditure of $657 billion, capital expenditure of $65 billion, debt service of $280 billion, and below-the-line expenditure of $8.4 billion. Madam Speaker, compensation of employees is 367 billion, or 56% of the non-debt recurrent expenditure. In addition, Madam Speaker, in this budget, we have 32.8 billion to meet the estimated second-year cost of the new compensation system, 6.5 billion to public sector health insurance, and 1.4 billion for the arrears to the NHT. The recurrent programs, Madam Speaker, 289.8 billion. Ministry of Finance will have $42 billion for public sector pensions and 3.1 billion to support local authorities for streetlights, Madam Speaker. The central government continues to pay the full bill for streetlights. Madam Speaker, we have 4.7 billion for the maintenance of roads, repairs to roads, and 1.2 billion for bridge development and construction. 7 billion for the supporting the JUTC, and Madam Speaker, 142.9 billion for the Ministry of Education, which represents 22% of non-debt expenditure. Of this amount, 9.3 billion is for school nutrition support, 15 billion for UE and UTEC, Madam Speaker. And in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, 8.4 billion for cash grants for PATH beneficiaries, and this includes or reflects the 18% increase approved by Cabinet under the leadership of Minister Samuda. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, 14.7 billion for drugs and medical supplies, and $10 billion for the University of the West Indies. Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security, 59 billion for the police, 32 billion for the JDF, 11 billion for the Department of Correctional Services, and $2 billion for MOCA. Capital expenditure, Madam Speaker, is programmed at $75.4 billion. And the main programs include $22.1 billion for the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project. $7.2 billion for the Montego Bay Perimeter Road, Madam Speaker. And very importantly, the Ministry of Agriculture, again, has the highest capital budget it has had in the last 20 years, Madam Speaker. Higher than last year, which was also the highest. With the Southern Plains Agriculture Development Project and the Essex Valley Irrigation Project, Madam Speaker, with a combined approximate $7 billion, Madam Speaker, to supply irrigation infrastructure, road rehabilitation, etc. Madam Speaker, there's 1.9 billion to procure 50 more garbage trucks for the NSWMA. And Madam Speaker, we're spending money to expand the hospital and clinic network in the country. 2.7 billion for the Spanish Town Hospital. Madam Speaker, $2 billion to come for phase 3 works at the Cornwall Regional Hospital, and $530 million in the redevelopment and modernization of the University Hospital. Madam Speaker, there's also an $8 billion capital expenditure allocation for projects that get approved throughout the year. Now, Madam Speaker, we share the benefits of our economic reform and economic recovery by making investments that improve quality of life and by making public investments that improve public service delivery. In this year's budget, we outline a number of those. Capital projects are multi-year undertakings and require significant analysis, planning, preparation prior to implementation. I'd like to share with you some of the critical capital investment projects in the pipeline for implementation in subsequent fiscal years. Madam Speaker, all adult Jamaicans interact with the tax office, who deliver collection services of taxes, licenses, fees to the public. We can improve quality of life by improving that interaction, by making it more comfortable and more efficient, Madam Speaker. We can do so by investing in technology to allow more services to be delivered online. But we can also improve the network of tax offices across the country. Most of our tax offices were built a long time ago for a smaller population, far fewer transactions, and at a time with far fewer cars. And hence our tax offices suffer from a lack of parking. Madam Speaker, over a number of years, we plan to upgrade tax offices across the country to provide more comfortable, timely, efficient service. 2 weeks ago, Madam Speaker, I broke ground on the Christiana Tax Office, which will provide a modern facility with green space. I want to show you some of the pictures. Green space, adequate parking, generator, and others, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, we are going to break ground on we are in development of the Montego Bay Tax Office, Madam Speaker, to upgrade to a Montego Bay Revenue Service Center, Madam Speaker, in Montego Bay, Madam Speaker, in the upcoming fiscal year. Madam Speaker, this tax office will feature the first ever drive-through teller at a tax office in Jamaica. It will be used for taxpayers in a hurry, Madam Speaker, taxpayers who have mobility issues, who are young or have children in the car and can't leave the kids in the car, Madam Speaker. Thoughtful design, Madam Speaker, for a new era. But, Madam Speaker, it's not only the out of the building we're pretty. The building is designed, Madam Speaker, for customer comfort. A new customer service hall which takes, Madam Speaker, into account the reality that many Jamaicans live with disabilities, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, you know, when you go to a tax office today, you know, where they put you to wait, well, you can't. I'll show you what a modern waiting area is going to look like, Madam Speaker, at the Montego Bay Revenue Center. As you wait to pay your taxes, Madam Speaker, you wait in comfort, Madam Speaker. We wait in comfort. Yeah? And, Madam Speaker, the staff are not going to be left out, because their training room will be modern, Madam Speaker. Modern training room for all. No, that's your CapEx dollars at work, Madam Speaker. In a few months, TAJ also plans to build out the interior of the new Mandeville Revenue Service Center, which, if all goes well, comes into service in the 24-25 years. We're also purchased land for the construction of a new tax office in Brownstown, St. Anne, to have construction begin in the 24-25 years. Now, everybody in Kingston say, wait a minute. All you talk about tax office outside, welcome to Kingston. Madam Speaker, King Street is the largest tax office in Jamaica, measured by volume of transactions. The volume of business there today far outstrips capacity. Persons have to traverse the stairs multiple times in a single visit. So frustrating to get their business done. Ever go upstairs, downstairs, go there? In addition, it's regularly overcrowded. I'm pleased to announce that TAJ has acquired the BNS building on King Street, which was previously BNS's head office, and which is a marquee building in Kingston. Every picture of old-time Jamaica features that building. And we're going to work with the Minister of Local Government to make sure that we have parking in the area. And the Member of Parliament, TAJ, Madam Speaker, will keep the external facade of the building, but will remodel the interiors to meet modern, functional flow of a tax office. The office will be used to relocate taxpayer services, cashiering, TRN, general info, driver's license compliance, from the current King Street location. And it's going through the design phases now for work to start in 2024, for it to be available to the public in 2025. Now we have to make sure that those timelines are met. TAJ, in collaboration with the UDC and the municipal authority, Madam Speaker, will work on the parking. Now, Madam Speaker, the Crossroads Tax Office accounts for a large volume of transactions, and the size and layout is not suitable for the current load. You see the pictures at Crossroads, you see people lined up outside, in a hot sun sometimes. At least now, TJ provides some comfort with some shade. But man, that's not the fault of the people in the TJ today. It's just that our growth and development has outstripped our capacity, and we have not invested in infrastructure. Which is why I'm so passionate, Madam Speaker, about the public investment and making sure we have enough room for that. We, TJ, Madam Speaker, is planning on building a 10-story Crossroads tax office and business center with 3 floors of parking to meet the growing needs of citizens. Now, this one is greenfield, right? We're now in the planning and finalizing the drawings. We have some work to do with the National Works Agency, right? And need some negotiations there to make the final, to get the final submissions and approvals. Madam Speaker, these are some of the upgrades and modernization projects. And when I come to talk next time, I'll talk about other places, right? Other places don't talk. But I want to just give you a little, prips. A little prips into what we're doing. Madam Speaker, some members of the House will remember a time 40 to 50 years ago when Kingston's waterfront was busy and vibrant, and the area was once a site of bustling commerce, a place to shop, gather, play, eat, drink, stroll, visited by thousands every year. I want you to just imagine a waterfront with old people, older persons strolling and relaxing along the promenade, young people playing, mothers watching over young children, friends meeting up to catch, with friends, getting a bite to eat, right? Shops busy, cafes, and bars noisy with customers. Madam Speaker, in the last few decades, the vibrancy has drained from the waterfront. And as the decades went by, the waterfront was underinvested in by private sector and by the public sector, right? The government lacked sufficient resources or capacity to invest substantively, and the quality of maintenance declined. People started feeling a little less safe and no longer walked around. Madam Speaker, limited resources were dedicated to upgrading what was there or into investing into the future of that part of Kingston. Madam Speaker, in the last 40 years or so, there have been more than 10 plans prepared for the redevelopment of all of downtown. And the Prime Minister is leading the most credible effort, Madam Speaker. Now, sadly, before now, none of these plans were implemented, and many reasons have been cited. Lack of funds, lack of a unified government framework, lack of government will, etc. Madam Speaker, the reality is that there's been a lack of coordinated action across government, and our economic fortunes, and Madam Speaker didn't allow for it, but our economic fortunes and fiscal conditions have strengthened. And though we're not through the woods, Madam Speaker, the principle of ensuring that we share the benefits of economic reform and economic recovery with the people mandates, Madam Speaker, that we fix up the waterfront. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce in a collaborative effort, and nothing that is meaningful in government, or few things meaningful in government, can be done by one ministry alone. It takes collaboration. So, Madam Speaker, in a collaborative effort, I'm pleased to announce that the government intends, not only it's known, it's in the press already, but I'm pleased to include in my presentation that the government intends to make a significant investment in our waterfront, starting with a signature waterfront park. On 9 acres of UDC-owned land across 1 mile of waterfront. The process to design the park will invite input from a broad base of stakeholders, and the plan will connect with existing other works, Madam Speaker, that will be spoken about. Madam Speaker, as has been demonstrated in similar projects around the world, public space and parks can be, and has been demonstrated in Harmony Park in Montego Bay, public space and parks can be transformational by boosting the identity and economic trajectory of the city. Of promoting pride and well-being, Madam Speaker. The waterfront park has the potential to become iconic, Madam Speaker. We're talking about 9 acres of land with 1 mile of waterfront. Just imagine a park covering all of that. Madam Speaker, it will serve a broad base of persons from the community, Jamaicans at large, and will attract overseas visitors as well. It will catalyze local economic growth and yield significant returns, Madam Speaker. Yield significant returns, Madam Speaker, to the public and private sector, and will eventually help to enhance revenues, Madam Speaker. It will improve quality of life and revitalize underinvested areas. Madam Speaker, as I said, it will be a transformative park. It will be an iconic public space, Madam Speaker, symbolic of the economic and commercial success that Jamaicans have been working towards. And the park is going to be possible because of our government's pragmatic approach to managing Jamaica's finances, which has generated the fiscal space for catalytic projects, Madam Speaker. We are working with the World Bank on this project, Madam Speaker, and with a team from the World Bank who have done this around the world. And Madam Speaker, the planning and design work will begin in this fiscal year 2023-24. Madam Speaker, last year the government indicated it would be pursuing the development of the North Coast Highway, the expansion between Miami Bay and Montego Bay. So I want to give a brief update that during the year, the government signed a financial advisory services agreement with the IFC, the subsidiary of the World Bank, to act as transaction advisors and for the project which has been developed in this fiscal year 23-24. The work plan for the IFC includes contracting a full feasibility study, developing the financial and contractual structure, and eventually supporting the GOG at taking the project to market and to look for entities that can invest in the project. Madam Speaker, the feasibility study, the way we've organized this, comes at no cost to the government. We have negotiated, Madam Speaker, and we have the benevolent support of our partners. The government has been provided with grant funding from the Global Infrastructure Fund of $1.7 million to undertake the feasibility. And the consulting team has a combination of well-regarded foreign and local firms, Madam Speaker, legal, technical, environmental. Madam Speaker, the feasibility, Madam Speaker, will also, there's another related feasibility to conduct for the North Coast, for this expansion to include, as has been mentioned before, a bypass around Discovery Bay and possibly Runaway Bay, which will complement the current North Coast Highway. Madam Speaker, this would bring improved access to long neglected communities in the hills near Brownstown, near the communities of Philadelphia, Dumbarton, and Sturgetown. The feasibility study is currently ready for procurement with the expectation that that report on the project will be completed by September 2023. Now, just to give you an idea, Madam Speaker, the expected value of the two projects, the North Coast Highway expansion and the bypasses, Madam Speaker, at implementation will be in the region of $1 billion. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce another important initiative that the government is working on that will significantly impact the lives of all Jamaicans. Jamaica's road network is deteriorating faster than it can be repaired due to a lack of sufficient funding being allocated for both routine and periodic maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. If left in this state, our road transport network could put Jamaica's transformational agenda at risk. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister and other members of the Cabinet and myself, we paid keen attention to the constituency debate, even when I was not present personally. the leader of opposition business was zealous in his attempt to ensure that I listened and I heard. Rest assured, leader of opposition business, that with media and technology, in addition to the distribution of texts, of speeches in Parliament, I was able to hear, read, and watch, and digest it all, even if I was traveling on government business or away for other reasons. And Madam Speaker, during the constituency debate, this chamber resonated in unison on to do something about the conditions of our roads on both sides. We heard the passionate advocacy on this topic from virtually all members who spoke. So I hope all members applaud when the time comes. Madam Speaker, Member Phillips was among the most, who is not here today, among the most outspoken on this topic, only to be surpassed by the singular, prominent Minister Everett Warmington, who uses every opportunity he can to remind me that $4 billion a year cannot maintain Jamaica's secondary roads. Minister Warmington is a consistent, fervent, and passionate advocate for the condition of Jamaica's roads. Madam Speaker, as a member of Parliament myself, I'm painfully aware of the discontent associated with poor road conditions. The poor state of road devalues homes and communities, increases wear and tear, Madam Speaker. The challenge, Madam Speaker, is that the way we attend to secondary roads, speaking as the Minister of Finance responsible for procurement, is not scalable. Parceling out allocation by constituency to each member of Parliament, suggesting roads for repair, nominating 3 or 5 contractors, as the case may be, is a process that does not lend itself to be scaling up. I could not allocate much more in good conscience, in real terms, on that basis. Madam Speaker, it's an inefficient way. We couldn't have 105 million contracts and 10 million contracts and 25 million contracts. Madam Speaker, it's reasonable to posit that the taxpayer does not get optimal value for money in procurement of materials, the deployment of equipment, and the application of technical know-how with this fragmented approach. And Madam Speaker, while it may be tolerable at the level of road, the level of what road rehabilitation is today, at the level of 4 billion, this approach could not be used if we are to respond to the loud and consistent demand from the public and their representatives for better roads with materially more expenditure. Madam Speaker, to address these issues, the government of Jamaica has decided to take decisive action. I'm pleased to inform this honorable House and the Jamaican people that the government of Jamaica will implement a $40 billion island-wide shared prosperity through accelerated improvement to our road network SPARK program. The SPARK program, Madam Speaker, will be executed over a 3-year period with the start of the project development in this fiscal year, because you have to go through PIMSEC, you have to satisfy PIMSEC. And Madam Speaker, having a year for it is, we're going to have to be very efficient, and NWA is going to have to get up to speed and make sure to get the job done, right? But we have to first design the project, plan the project, and for implementation, Madam Speaker, in the fiscal years that follow, under the theme, modernizing our roads for our shared prosperity. Now, this, Madam Speaker, is within the envelope of capital expenditure I announced before, which has been 2.3, 2.4% of GDP, which we need to get all the way up, okay? So, Madam Speaker, this intervention, Madam Speaker, we consider, especially in some parts of Jamaica, where the condition of the roads are associated with accidents and road deaths. So, Madam Speaker, the SPARK program won't be constituency-based, but elected representatives will have the opportunity to make input. Madam Speaker, we estimate that over 2,000 roads across Jamaica will be able to be rehabilitated through this SPARK project in a transparent way. Madam Speaker, the roads to be repaired will be itemized, and the project, Madam Speaker, will be evaluated under the government's public investment management system. As I said before, a project of this magnitude and scope needs to be properly and transparently developed and put through that process. And this can't all happen in a year. And we aim to begin implementation in the next fiscal year. Madam Speaker, we are listening. Madam Speaker, representation works. No. This is a national program, Madam Speaker. Okay. National program. We, Madam Speaker, we are listening and we hear you and we are responding. Madam Speaker, for all who don't think the constituency debates work, Madam Speaker, we are responding to you. The executive is responding to the parliament, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while we preserve the gains, increase the gains, we intend to share the gains with the Jamaican people through the Spark program, Madam Speaker, which shares prosperity through accelerated improvement in our road network. Now, Madam Speaker, there have been times past where we borrowed money for these kinds of programs. This time, Madam Speaker, speaking on behalf of all Jamaicans about this 40 billion, this time, I feel we money this. Madam Speaker, one of the best ways to share the gains of economic reform and recovery with the Jamaican people is by improving our public transportation system. Minister Shaw makes that point every day. A matter of grave concern, Madam Speaker, is the JUTC's inability to fulfill its mandate to provide 31,000 seats per day to meet the demand of the traveling public. It requires 450 to 500 buses. The JUTC currently, Madam Speaker, assumes an average daily bus deployment of 200 buses or thereabouts. Of the total JUTC fleet, Madam Speaker, listen to this. Of the total 200, more than 100, Madam Speaker, are over 10 years old and due to be retired immediately. Consequently, the maintenance and operating costs are very high. And you're seeing, Mickey Phillips talked about it, increasing levels of subvention from the government, reaching a record high $7 billion this year. As it now stands, Madam Speaker, the newest buses, Minister Shaw has updated the House many times about, are the newest buses to come are 5 compressed gas Golden Dragons that were purchased in 2019. And prior to this, there were 35 Golden Dragons between 2016 and we had 200 Volvo buses. Here I'm talking about the fleet, coming way back from 2011 to 2014. Madam Speaker, happy to remind the House, because this is public information already, that 70 new buses, which are 45 diesel, 20 compressed, and 5 electric, will come in this fiscal year. But I'm also pleased to announce, Madam Speaker, that the government will be procuring an additional 200 electric buses on a phased basis over a 3-year period, commencing in this fiscal year. Madam Speaker, as we speak, an electric bus drove up and parked outside of the Parliament as a demonstration, Madam Speaker, of our resolve. See right there, it's here, Madam Speaker, the electric bus. We're going for 200, Madam Speaker. And we have people on the bus, Madam Speaker. So when you walk outside of Parliament, Madam Speaker, you'll be looking into the future, Madam Speaker. for the physically challenged. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to be very clear that when we say 200 buses, it don't mean say it's 200 exact of that their bus, because there's a procurement process, and whoever wins is the bus that we buy. But what we're saying is we want electric buses. We're going to do this work this year. Minister Shaw's ministry is going to do the work this year to put the project in place so that it can be delivered 100 buses in next year, 24-25, and another 100 in 25-26, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, last year in my presentation, I announced upgrade of the Jamaican banknotes, along with the introduction of a new $2,000 note. And the reasons were, material technology allows us to produce banknotes of greater durability, and that reduces the frequency of replacement, which lowers the cost. There are new technologies for the visually impaired, and as one member of the visually impaired community at the launch said with glee, that visually impaired people with these notes can run their own businesses now without anybody helping them, because of how prominent the features are. And there'll be clear color distinctions that we don't mix up notes. Now, Madam Speaker, with this upgrade also, several banknote printers will be able to print Jamaican banknotes, increasing competition, providing better assurance of pricing. And the study showed the need for a $2,000 note, as I previously described. Madam Speaker, please update the House that Delarue, the printer of the banknotes, has completed the manufacture of the entire stock of the new polymer series. By the end of November 2022, the BOJ had adequate stock of the new polymer note in its vaults, ready for circulation. And we had a soft launch in December. Madam Speaker, someone whispered to me that we should introduce the banknotes here too, and that is what I will do. So in the middle of the Parliament is a display of the actual live new banknotes. And Madam Speaker, they've covered it in glass. I wonder why. Covered in glass. But, Madam Speaker, I brought some specimens with me. The only difference with the real notes is that they have specimens written all over them. And I want to share them, Madam Speaker, so that you can see. Now, you have to be careful because the notes can drop out, right? So you have to be careful as you look at them. But I'm going to ask that they be passed around, Madam Speaker. No, but these are specimens, so it's okay. So I'm going to, if we can pass 3 around on this side, Madam Speaker, so everybody gets a chance to see what the notes look like, Madam Speaker. And my brothers and sisters on our side, not to be left out, Madam Speaker, if we can, there's only a few of them, so we just give one over there. And then the Speaker, Madam Speaker, if she can get. Now, Madam Speaker. Yeah. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased, and as Madam Speaker, I just want to Madam Speaker, I am pleased, and I'm sure you are too, that the Right Excellent Alexander Bustamante and the Right Excellent Norman Manley, both national heroes of Jamaica, have been restored to appear on the upgraded $1,000 note. Madam Speaker, they're currently on the $1 and $5 coins. They're only pushed off of previous notes due to the devaluation of our currency by over 50,000%. Yeah, over decades of instability. And as we find our footing again and we look to a brighter future, it is only right that they are restored. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to announce, and I'm sure you're pleased to see, that the Right Excellent George William Gordon and the Right Excellent Paul Bogle both national heroes of Jamaica, have been restored to appear on the $50 banknote. Madam Speaker, George William Gordon is on the $10 coin, and Paul Bogle, who gave his life on the gallows, Madam Speaker, so that we could be free, is nowhere on our currency today. Madam Speaker, as we find our footing macroeconomically, that restoration is important to our identity. And Paul Bogle, George William Gordon are once again on our banknotes, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, I know there was a little bit of excitement about this one. And I'm pleased that the Most Honorable Michael Manley and the Most Honorable Edward Siaga will appear on the $2,000 note. And the Most Honorable Edward Siaga makes his first appearance, Madam Speaker, on banknote of Jamaica, and deservedly so. Madam Speaker, the Most Honorable Donald Sangster and the Most Honorable Hugh Shearer on the updated $5,000 note. But Madam Speaker, I am most pleased, and I know you are all too, that the man who inspired an entire diaspora of Africans across oceans and continents, the man who awoke the consciousness of Jamaicans and Black people everywhere, who instilled in them pride and belief and confidence, the man whose words resonate and guide us today as much as they did 100 years ago, the man, the right, excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey, a national hero who does not today appear on any banknote, Madam Speaker. Does not appear on any banknote. He's on a $20 coin. Madam Speaker, we are restoring the right, excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey to his rightful place on our upgraded $100 note. $500. And Madam Speaker, quite rightly, Garvey is known for his promotion of Black nationalism and Black consciousness. But his legacy is much broader than that. Anyone who has perused the Garvey archives, I believe that they're online, meaning the repository at the University of California, as I've had the distinct honor, I mean, anybody can do it. It's easy for everyone to see that Garvey believed, wrote about, and advocated for ordinary men and women to embrace and employ the tools and the methods of the powerful to empower themselves and achieve their goals. He was not shy about that. He understood the value of enterprise and the critical role of capital, and he demonstrated an entrepreneurial risk-taking work ethic. Madam Speaker, 100 years ago, Marcus Garvey sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange for the Black Star Liner. I want you to think about this for a moment, Madam Speaker. Just think about it. 100 years ago, at a time when lynching was commonplace in the United States, in the South, when racial subjugation was an operating premise, and when half of the world lived under colonial domination, a poor Black immigrant from Jamaica incorporated the Black Star Line Shipping Corporation. It was an enterprise, it was a company, and he incorporated it in Delaware. In 1919, he raised private equity, Madam Speaker, issued share certificates, and bought ships. He later sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange. Madam Speaker, in the 100 years between then and now, how many Jamaicans have sought to raise capital on the New York Stock Exchange? When you answer that question, you understand the significance of Marcus Garvey. And you understand that his legacy is not just about Black nationalism. I put it to you, Madam Speaker. Just imagine the audacity. I put it to you, Madam Speaker, that the audacity of hope did not begin in Springfield, Illinois, under Barack Obama. Long before Marcus Garvey embodied that audacity and has been and will always continue to be, Madam Speaker, an inspiration to generations of Jamaicans, of West Africans, of Americans and Africans. And Madam Speaker, we are pleased to restore the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey to his rightful place, center stage position on our bank notes. Madam Speaker, the timeline for the issuance of the new notes into circulation requires the banks to complete the adaptation of their automated banking machines and other equipment. The process is advanced. We expect testing in May with a view of full implementation by June of 2023. And BOJ will develop the appropriate public relations and communications campaign. Now, Madam Speaker, let us not just talk about audacity of Marcus Garvey. Let us implement it. Madam Speaker, as we discuss his legacy, and as we pursue the hopes and aspirations of the Jamaican people, Madam Speaker, let's remind ourselves that Jamaica has proven its ability to compete internationally in many areas of physical sport. Everyone knows the spectacular exploits of Usain Bolt, Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price, Chris Gayle, Leon Bailey, Raheem Sterling, born in my constituency, among many others. The drive of the Jamaican is unmatched when it comes to focus, determination, and execution required to attain goals. With so many bright minds all over Jamaica, the next area ripe for competitive contest, Madam Speaker, is the prestigious mind game of chess. In 1999, Jamaica-born Maurice Ashley made history by becoming the first Black person in the world to become a chess grandmaster. The first Black chess grandmaster in the history of the world. See the history again? Is Jamaica, from the Prime Minister's constituency. Now, Madam Speaker, Minister Grange and I agree that it is high time for another Jamaican to follow in his footsteps. Prior to 1988, 35 years ago, India had 0 chess grandmasters. Today they have 80. Their production of chess grandmasters coincided with their period of rapid economic and social development. Madam Speaker, the Jamaican chess community, without much national support, has already produced 2 homegrown international masters, which is a level just below a grandmaster. And if Jamaican individuals can achieve that on their own, imagine what can be achieved with dedicated and sustained national support. Madam Speaker, the International Chess Association, called FIDE, reports 1,773 active grandmasters, chess grandmasters. Of this number, 788 are from Europe, 256 from Russia, 130 from Soviet states, 101 from the USA. China and India have 116, South America 52, Little Israel has 43, and Little Cuba has 27. Madam Speaker, of the 1,773 active chess grandmasters in the world, only 2 belong to majority Black countries. One from Zambia, one from South Africa. Maurice Ashley is registered in the United States. Something is not right about that, Madam Speaker. And if Marcus Garvey were around today, I bet he would have something to say about that. And he would lead us, Madam Speaker, or lead the change. He would challenge us, Madam Speaker, to challenge the status quo through hard work and performance. There was a time where Black people were underrepresented in the elite levels of other sports as well. Madam Speaker, development is not all about monetary and economic gains. Intellectual and social achievements are very important parts of our development. And as we, Madam Speaker, preserve the gains of our economic reform and maintain the gains of our economic recovery, and we build on these gains and share the benefits, Madam Speaker, by using these gains to finance social and human development, this leads in turn to economic gains, a virtuous cycle, Madam Speaker, and that is what we seek. But development is not guaranteed and does not come without sacrifice, effort, and focus. The game of chess is useful in social, emotional, and intellectual development of children. This is one of the reasons that chess is so prominent in Cuba, our most immediate neighbor, which is a powerhouse in global chess. Madam Speaker, the government of Jamaica signals its intention of implementing a program that will produce a Jamaican chess grandmaster within the next 10 years. Madam Speaker, while it will be an individual achievement for that trailblazing Jamaican, it will be a significant national human development achievement for Jamaica. Achieving the goal of a Jamaican chess grandmaster will require a broad-based strategy. But the Grandmaster Maurice Ashley has signaled his availability and willingness to godfather this national effort in collaboration with the Jamaica Chess Federation, with the support of the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport. Madam Speaker, the government will start with an allocation of $40 million towards the Jamaica Chess Federation through the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport to begin this audacious journey. Madam Speaker, with Grandmaster Ashley, they'll develop a national program to achieve this goal, even as the Jamaica Chess Federation pursues a broad-based chess in schools program. Madam Speaker, I put it to you that from these shores, Madam Speaker, will rise Nobel Prize winners, Madam Speaker. From these shores will rise chess grandmasters, Madam Speaker. From these shores will rise field medalists and other persons who achieve intellectually, Madam Speaker, with sustained national effort. Greatness is in Jamaica's DNA, Madam Speaker. And audacity is in our blood. As the good book says, eye has not seen, nor has ear heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man what God has in store for his people. Now, Madam Speaker, I turn my attention to revenue measures. Between 2016 and 2022, the number of licensed motor cars on the road, between 2016 and 2022, the number of licensed cars increased from 330,000 to approximately 473,000. That's data from TAJ. Now, I don't know what could be going on that would make that happen, but I know that's a 43% growth in the number of cars on the road. Something, Madam Speaker, must have been happening. Madam Speaker, activities connected broadly to the repair and maintenance of motor vehicles is a large chunk of domestic economic activities and jobs. Just look at the stat in the report when they come out. There was a section, repair and mechanic, etc. Just think about it. In every community, muffler shop, spray shop, body shop. There's more we can do, Madam Speaker, to deepen the motor vehicle service sector, enhance economic activity, creating jobs and providing value to Jamaicans. Madam Speaker, currently there isn't a vibrant trade-in subsector in Jamaica for the second sale used car. You know, where you can go and you sell your car to the dealer and then he warehouse it, inventory it, and then him sell it. That doesn't happen here. That doesn't mean that vehicles aren't resold, but this is largely done and handled by the owners themselves. Even when you go to a lot, you end up selling it to the buyer, not to the agent. The reason for this seeming absent, and then if you look to the United States, look how big that industry is, that second sale industry. Now, when you go from 330,000 cars to 472,000 cars, it presents the opportunity for us to have a new subsector of genuine second sale, which also could reduce imports. The reason for the seeming absence, Madam Speaker, of registered car dealers in the second sale space is that currently the law, something that's been around for a long time, the GCT of 15% is collected on the full sale price of a secondary car, whereas when an individual sells it, it's a fixed fee of $12,000 or $18,000. So as a result, we think we are helping by having this, but what we do is to suppress economic activity, because right now, no secondary sale is reported in GDP statistics, meaning that industry is silent and dead. Well, Madam Speaker, we aim to awake that industry here in Jamaica. We can catalyze the formalization of the subsector, which will lead to the establishment of new companies or new subsidiaries, new jobs in the business of trade-ins. And formalization would lead to a more accurate reflection of the true economic activity of the motor vehicle trade in Jamaica. And this would bring Jamaica into line with other jurisdictions with value-added regimes such as Canada, the UK, and Barbados. And the benefit of adjusting our regime is to provide more options to consumers on selling their second-hand vehicles, to reduce the hassle of selling. So, you know, sometimes you want to sell, and you would love to be able to just drive in and say, look, I give you this for that. How much people would do that? You know, I give you this for that plus a little bit. Right? Because you get the transaction done immediately rather than to post it and wait 3 weeks or 3 months or 6 months for somebody to buy. Right? So we will improve service to the customer at the same time as launching new businesses. A simple small change, and the change is such that we don't collect any money on it anyway, because it's such a killer that there's no commercial establishment really engaged in that business. Oh, there's no commercial establishment really engaged in that business. So, Madam Speaker, under this new policy, upcoming legislation, Madam Speaker, individual owners selling their motor vehicles will continue to pay a fat fee of 12,000 or 8,000. So if you prefer to do what you've always been doing, no problem. However, we will allow for registered motor vehicle dealers selling second sale motor vehicles to pay a rate of 15% on the dealer dollar margin rather than the full cost price. So you buy the vehicle from somebody for $100 and you sell it for $120, you pay the GCT on the 20. And that small change, Madam Speaker, will catalyze a new subsector in Jamaica. It's like how when we change stamp duty and transfer tax, all of a sudden buildings start pop up all over the place, Madam Speaker. I put it to you that this change, when it's implemented, you're going to have new businesses being established in the country. It has, boy, Madam Speaker, I'm telling you. So, Madam Speaker, the supply of trading vehicles shall apply to GCT. Well, I won't go into the details here. You understand the concept. When the law is tabled, time to go into how exactly it works. Now, Madam Speaker, Jamaica energy commodity imports were just under $2 billion in 21-22. And for the size of our economy, this is an extremely unhealthy dependence that makes our economy vulnerable. We've experienced energy price shocks several times in our history, and we must use that experience to our advantage. Madam Speaker, we must reduce our dependence on energy commodities. Today, I want to talk about using fiscal policy to bend energy choices towards a greater use of renewable energy. I want to talk about fiscal policy changes to incentivize the installation of solar energy systems. Madam Speaker, using fiscal measures to incentivize solar photovoltaic is consistent with what we've been doing. We have, no GCT on inputs to renewable solar energy, the photovoltaic panels, inverters, the photovoltaic batteries. Just last year, we added lithium-ion batteries. Madam Speaker, we can go further and we must go further. In the United States, there's a solar investment tax credit that they use, Madam Speaker, to incentivize investment in the solar by domestics, where the tax credit is given. In Barbados, through their Income Tax Act, they provided a deduction for expenditure on renewable energy devices. In Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, who have their own source of oil and natural gas, they still find it necessary to have tax credits for solar water heaters. Madam Speaker, the local cost of a solar system can be, varies, depends on the size of the system. And to incentivize the input across households, the government of Jamaica will provide an income tax credit equivalent to 30% of the purchase price of the solar photovoltaic system, up to a maximum of investment cost of $4 million. And that fiscal measure will be implemented by way of an amendment to the Income Tax Act. Now, Madam Speaker, the portfolio of agriculture is not mine, but I want to highlight the support of the Ministry of Finance will give to various policies of the Ministry of Agriculture, Madam Speaker, to ensure food security and to rejuvenate the horse racing industry by having high quality breeding animals. Madam Speaker, a consistent theme is the need to generate more domestic economic activity, right? Whether it is through the variety of means I've described throughout my presentation. The more domestic activity we have, the more jobs we generate. A consistent theme, Madam Speaker, is making small changes that cost very little, but have the potential to create new subsectors and rejuvenate others. We want to encourage importation of horses, not because we like horses, but in our own collective national self-interest. Right. I agree that some may. Madam Speaker, we want to incentivize the importation of mares and fillies for two main purposes. One, they would assist the industry in the numbers, Madam Speaker. The numbers are dwindling now and making that sport unattractive, which is a big part of domestic economic activity in certain parts of Jamaica. And if we are to do that, Madam Speaker, if we are to incentivize it, we'd have better quality horses coming into Ireland, would be more competitive, and would help the industry in terms of excitement when their racing career is over. They'd also improve the quality of the breeding stock. Madam Speaker, it's been noted that the broodmare stock has been increasing since 2010, Madam Speaker. But just over 40% of the broodmare stock was either barren or not bred, Madam Speaker. Every additional 100 horses in the industry creates an immediate multiplier effect on direct employment of grooms, trainers, exercise riders, jockey agents, and agricultural workers. And it also serves to increase race day and by extension revenues from those events. And the most important thing, Madam Speaker, is we're not collecting anything from it now anyway. Right? So you have something, right, that ought to be a revenue measure, but it is such a disincentive that nothing is coming in, and at the same time, a subsector is declining. Remove it, Madam Speaker. Allow economic agents to pursue their interests, and what we have is a potential for more jobs and more economic activity. Now, Madam Speaker, we're not limited to horses. The Ministry of Agriculture has a wide ambit. And the issue of food security, especially during the height of the pandemic, was a big issue. Currently, Jamaica produces 10% of its consumption needs for goat meat, pork, and mutton. And Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture has embarked on a program to reduce food importation, and we want to support them, and to increase income for rural dependent farms, to reduce the importation of animal feed and protein sources dependent on animal feed. Madam Speaker, small ruminants can be fed with locally produced materials And when global shortages take place, we would still have protein sources that do not depend on importation of corn feed or other raw materials. Madam Speaker, small ruminants do not require feed in commercial quantities. They can be started with small amounts, Madam Speaker, but by and large, most farmers will not purchase large quantities. Madam Speaker, I had an interesting conversation during the year with a very well-known and large goat farmer who is no stranger, Madam Speaker. And I want that goat farmer to know, Madam Speaker, who has become my friend through our interaction, that the algorithm, Madam Speaker, is going to work in his favor this time around. Madam Speaker, it is expected, the Ministry of Agriculture expects that over 6,000 goats, sheep, and pigs will be imported over the next 3 years. They will be for breeding, Madam Speaker, and to boost our local supplies. These will not be slaughtered for the consumer market. The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will import and distribute the animals in breeding clusters, and private farmers will qualify to import their own. The initiative is to start in 2023 for 5 years, an initial period. Madam Speaker, today, we only collect 6 million in GCT for the importation of horses, goats, pigs, and sheep combined. These policy changes give up that small amount, but will likely generate substantially more and support domestic economic activity. Madam Speaker, every day I walk into this honorable house, I'm humbled by the opportunity I have to serve the people of Jamaica. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and in particular the Prime Minister, the most Honorable Andrew Holness, for providing me this opportunity to serve you, the people of Jamaica. Most importantly, I want to thank the people of Jamaica on the island of Jamaica and in the diaspora for your tremendous
You have just
dedication,
listened
sacrifice,
to a live broadcast of the
The
$1
past few years have been
trillion budget
unprecedented in their
debate
scope and
in the
impact,
House of Parliament
particularly with
by
the onset of the
Minister
pandemic,
Dr.
which no one could have predicted.
the Honorable
led to the
Nigel
most
Clarke,
devastating
Minister of
economic
Finance
setback
and
that
Planning
Jamaica
and the
experienced.
Public Service.
Madam Speaker,
Join us at 8 p.m.
again,
this evening
in closing, I'm pleased,
when
Madam
we will be
Speaker, to
speaking
report to the
about
House
the
that to Jamaican
compensation
people
package
here and abroad,
of
that
the
because of the
Jamaica
prudent
Constable
policies of the
Force.
government, we were not able
Join us
to
at
only
8
survive
p.m.
the
this
pandemic,
evening.
but
We'll be speaking
like
more about
only
that.
a
Our
handful
special
of
guest
countries
will
around the
be our
world,
special
Madam
guest.
Speaker,
We won't tell
have
who our
thrived.
special guest will be until you come on.
Economic growth
So we're going to
has
speak
returned, or
about
economic
the
output has returned to
compensation
pre-pandemic
package
levels.
of the JCF.
Unemployment has fallen
We're
to
going to speak
pre-pandemic
about
levels, and our debt
teachers
levels
who are
have fallen
demonstrating
below
all over the
pre-pandemic
island
levels.
for higher
Jamaica has been
wages.
recognized
Did the
for our
Minister of
successes
Finance
in an economic
put in
recovery.
his package
And Madam Speaker, if we
a
keep
compensation
at it,
package for
Jamaica is
the
poised to
teachers
be
and
the breakout country of the
the
third
police
decade of
officers?
the 21st century.
Join us this evening as we give you more about it. Join
Madam
myself,
Speaker,
Wilfred
good policies
Ralligan,
matter.
Wayne Lonesome,
We have recovered from the
Nelson
pandemic
Truby,
and have done
and yours
so
truly, Jeffrey
strongly.
Tavares. We'll be live
We
at
cannot
8 p.m.
take
this
this
evening.
success for granted, however,
This is a
and
live
need to ensure that we
broadcast
preserve the
from
economic
the
recovery. And preservation
Parliament of
requires
Jamaica,
prudent policies.
where the
Madam
Minister
Speaker,
of
as
Finance,
such, we remain committed to pursuing a path
Dr.
of
the Honorable
macroeconomic
Nigel Clarke,
stability.
has just
We
laid
established
out
an
his
independent
$1
fiscal
trillion
commission. Madam
budget.
Speaker, we are putting in credit
Until you
lines.
join us
We have
at 8
established a
p.m. I'm
national
Jeffrey
disaster
Tavares
fund.
saying thank you all
Madam
for
Speaker,
watching.
our foreign
Remember to like,
reserves are
share,
held
and
at
subscribe.
$4 billion
See you at
dollars.
8
We are
p.m. this
strengthening
evening.
our regulatory framework. We are sharing the gains of economic recovery with our public sector employees through a comprehensive reform with a historic increase in compensation while building a fairer and more equitable compensation structure. We're protecting those employees and workers, such as security guards and sanitation workers, cooks in our schools, watchmen, and many others who have been deprived of the respect and benefits of full-time employment by ensuring that we end the government's use of or abuse of contractual employment. We are committed, Madam Speaker, to increasing the minimum wage to ensure that the majority of employees have the ability to obtain a living wage that increases their standard of living. We're revising the Customs Act. We're providing billions of dollars to provide startup and growth capital to entrepreneurs. We're committed to growing our economy through large-scale projects, Madam Speaker. We're deepening financial inclusion and access to markets through Jamdex and providing incentives to facilitate growth and development. We're making it easier and cheaper for students to access loans and to pursue their education through the Student Loan Bureau. Madam Speaker, removing barriers such as guarantees for past students. We're helping to prepare our students to enter the globalized workforce by providing billions of dollars in scholarships for teachers in science and technology, engineering and math through MICO and UTEC. Madam Speaker, we have tabled, Madam Speaker, largest budget in Jamaica's history to improve quality public service across a number of areas. We're upgrading our tax offices across the island. We're building a major waterfront park in downtown Kingston to transform the economic trajectory of downtown, to create jobs and to attract greater investment and development. We're building and completing major highways, Madam Speaker, across the North Coast and bypasses subject to feasibility studies, Madam Speaker, in Runaway Bay and Discovery Bay. We're launching Madam Speaker, a large and comprehensive road upgrading and rehabilitation program, Madam Speaker, the 40 billion island-wide shared prosperity through accelerated improvement for our road network, SPARK program. Madam Speaker, we're strengthening our transport system by procuring 200 new electric buses over the next 3 years. We're rolling out new banknotes, Madam Speaker, that restore our national heroes to our banknotes, Madam Speaker, that speak much to our identity and our history. We've launched an ambitious and audacious plan to help Jamaica train and build, Madam Speaker, an international chess grandmaster over the next decade. Madam Speaker, this represents the 6th consecutive budget speech in which we have not introduced any new taxes on the people of Jamaica. And Madam Speaker, by definition, the 6th year where we have reduced tax rates, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is the 8th consecutive budget where we have had no new net taxes. Madam Speaker, this is all under the Andrew Holness administration. Does anybody, Madam Speaker, mistake that? Madam Speaker, we have done so because we are committed to not only preserving our economic recovery, but to increase in it, and more importantly, to share the gain with the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, we are being very clinical by finding those areas, Madam Speaker, those nuisance areas where the tax yield is very low, but the frustration very high. Where we earn little from the taxes, Madam Speaker, but we stymie economic activity. And we are fixing those areas, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we believe in Jamaica. We believe and support the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, we are firmly committed to providing the economic environment and resources necessary to ensure that the people of Jamaica grow and prosper, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, importantly, as we experience gains from economic reform and economic recovery, this government, Madam Speaker, has shown that we will continue to share those gains with the people of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, thank you, and may God continue to bless you, to bless the Parliament, to bless our nation, and to bless the people of Jamaica, Jamaica, land we love.
We have just a live broadcast from the Parliament of Jamaica, where the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Nigel Clarke, has laid out his budget of $1 trillion. Join us at 8 p.m. this evening when we'll be speaking about the compensation package for the rank and file of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Join myself, yours truly, Jeffrey Tavares, Wilfred Radigan, Wayne Lonesome, and Herb Nelson Jr. with our special guests will be coming on. Thank you all very much. May God bless you, and may God bless Jamaica land we love. Have a good evening. Join us at 8 p.m.
Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, what a wonderful presentation. So, Madam Speaker, I now ask that the debate on the bill be suspended until Thursday, March 9, 2023, when the opposition spokesman on finance and member of parliament for Southeast St. Andrew, Mr. Julian Robinson, will make his contribution to the debate.
Members, the question is that the debate on the bill be suspended until Thursday, the 9th of March, 2023, when the opposition spokesman, the member from St. Andrews Southern on finance, will make his contribution to the debate. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. No, hold on.
Madam Speaker?
No. The parliament is not over. There's one other item that has to be dealt with.
Will members please sit? Thank you. Madam Speaker, I now ask for the recommittal of the item announcements to allow the clerk to make a corrigendum to the number given to the ministry paper tabled earlier.
Members of this honorable house, I now ask for the recommittal of the item announcement to enable the clerk to make a corrigendum to the number given to the ministry paper, which was tabled earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Formerly tabled as ministry paper number 28, I now table ministry paper number 30 of 2023, entitled Revenue Measures for the financial year 2023-2024.
House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, after a wonderful presentation by the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the House adjourns until Thursday, March 9, 2023 at 2 p.m. sharp.
Members, the question is that the House to adjourn until March 9th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.